I am Kaz, host of Atheist Edge. Tonight we are joined by Fabian versus Jangles. And tonight we have Jangles going first. Each person is going to have 10-minute opening statements, then a 50-minute opening discussion, and a 25-minute Q&A. So Jangles, at your first word, I will start the timer.
Hi everyone, my name's Jangles, and the last time I was on Modern Day Debate, it was during the live event they had, the big in-person live event they had a few weeks ago. So after completely demolishing Alex Stein on a topic pretty similar to this, you might also remember a testy interaction I had with Ariel Scarcella during her panel after she accused teachers who supported queer students behind the parents' backs of being groomers. I flipped her off and it was very classy, as I'm known to be. So during the Q&A of that panel, I confronted her about the use of that term, which means to coerce a child in order to sexually exploit them, and she tried to walk it back, while also weirdly defending its use as a politically effective term. She, like most right-wingers who toss this term around these days, knows it isn't true but values the power it has to demonize their political enemies. I'll bring up this anecdote because hours later, a deranged loser killed 5 people and wounded 19 others with gunfire at a gay club in Colorado. The motives haven't been set in stone yet, but today that person was charged with 305 criminal counts, including bias-motivated crimes. To be clear, while it is too early to definitively say what their motive was, it's hard to look at months and months of escalating rhetoric and attacks on queer spaces and assume that it was purely coincidental. What's not conjecture is the right-wing response to the shooting. On Tucker Carlson's show the following Tuesday, shootings will continue to happen until we end this evil agenda that is attacking children. From Matt Walsh, is it that hard not to cross-dress in front of kids? If it's causing this much chaos and violence, why do you insist on continuing to do it? From Tim Pool, we shouldn't tolerate pedophiles grooming kids. Club Q had a grooming event. How do we prevent the violence and stop the grooming? To be clear, the grooming event in question was a drag brunch to be held tragically the next day on the Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day devoted to honoring trans people murdered for being who they are. An all-ages drag brunch involves fully clothed performers singing and dancing to songs to an audience consisting of parents and their children. There is no reality in which an honest person can call this a grooming event unless they think gender nonconformity is not only inherently sexual, but infectious. The grooming rhetoric and the panic it has promoted relies on the dehumanization of all queer identities in order to be effective. If you saw us as people, you'd see that we have a perfectly reasonable and moral reason for wanting to normalize queer identities in society, and yes, that includes children. We were once children. We remember what it was like growing up in a society that viewed us as deviants, as evil, as diseased. We remember struggling alone because our family and friends and teachers and the media we consumed told us we were sick. We've fought for our rights for decades, and not all of us lived to see the benefits. We want to create a better world. Full stop. That means we don't want to see innocent children ostracized and demonized for natural and benign variations in human behavior. That can only happen if gay and trans and gender nonconforming people are seen as a part of everyday life, which we are. That can only happen if it's okay to be gay or trans or queer. But that might sound dangerously close to reasonable, so instead the right has to pretend it's an evil plot to harm children. This national panic was never about protecting children. There's a reason there's no libs of TikTok exposing children who were brought to Hooters. There's a reason there isn't an uproar about grooming children every time Disney includes a straight romance in one of its kids' films. There's a reason that children can be inundated with depictions of gender all day, every day, but introducing the concept of a transgender person somehow sexualizes them. It's because plenty of people still see queer identities as inherently sexual and deviant and infectious. We still have work to do. For tonight's debate, Scott is in a difficult position. He said that the term groomer has nothing to do with sexualization. I know that's false, he knows it's false, and if you take a gander over at the more, interesting characters in the MDD live chat on his side, they know it's false too. This current queer panic is more or less a rehash of the CRT panic from 2020, and they didn't use groomer then. Use of the term didn't spike until March of this year, when the term became a popular slur against queer people who exist near children. The lie that they're coming for your kids has been levied at gay and trans people for as long as we've been marginally allowed to exist in society. The malicious sexual connotation is baked into the word, and that's why it's been politically effective to the point where we're only beginning to see the violence it has caused. This movement, to use the term groomer, to connect pride flags in classrooms or drag queens reading books to children to some nefarious pedophile plot, was always stupid and false, but there's still just enough bigotry in the public zeitgeist to make it effective. It's inspired far-right militia groups to terrorize children at drag events. It's inspired lawmakers to baselessly outlaw effective medical treatments, and it, very likely, has inspired at least one person to fill 5 body bags not even a month ago. So I'm interested to hear what defenses Scott has for its continued use. I want to hear Scott's reasoning as to why my earlier reasoning for wanting to normalize queer identities is grooming, but somehow the changes he no doubt wants to implement in society would not constitute as grooming. So that's my opening statement.
All right. Thank you so much, Jangles, for your opening statement. And now we will kick it over to Fabian for his opening statement. At your first word, Fabian, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Yeah, I am Scott from Fabian Liberty. You can find me everywhere. It's Fabian Liberty. Thanks for having me. Wasn't expecting to see somebody standing on the graves of the LGBT community immediately in their opening statement, but let's go ahead and get into this. Before I can explain why the left are groomers, it's important that we define terms. Grooming is a word with many connotations, only some of which apply here. For example, if a CEO mentors a young man with potential and hopes of allowing him to ascend to leadership, one can say he's been groomed for this. So moving forward, I'll be using this definition. Grooming is the act of bringing a child into a sexual, political, or racial ideology, practice, cult, or lifestyle, with the knowledge or consent by his or her guardians for the aim of isolating them from their family so the external party can abuse and manipulate them. So how does this apply to leftism? Sure. We've all seen the dozens of cases of crazy blue-haired deer people on libs of TikTok. We also recognize this is the excess of a country of 330 million people. These individual cases are horrific and often involve love bombing, blatant indoctrination, secrets from parents, and a laundry list of abuses. They're a distraction, however. They're simply the fallout, the symptom of a far more pernicious and evil encroachment on your children and this country. Groomers in schools are woke individuals engaged in the praxis of woke ideology or critical consciousness. The philosophy speaks through them. As Carl Jung famously stated, people do not have ideas, ideas have people. Those blue-haired deer people are simply ideologically possessed. Many Americans, especially conservatives, are finally waking up to the excesses of wokeness and the attack on their children, but they fail to see the larger picture. The entire field of education is overtaken with a philosophy that is both pedophilic and Marxist. Sounds crazy, right? I'm sure that my opponent will attempt to call me a conspiracy theorist. He's done so before. The problem is that I've actually read queer theory. So let's look at some of the evidence. Claim number 1, wokeness is pedophilic and thus the woke are sexual groomers, at least in some capacity. Well, Gail Rubin's Thinking Sex, which is the foundational document of all queer theory, is overwhelmingly pro-man-boy love. So much so, in fact, that she's quoted on NAMBLA's website. Pat Califfa, author of Macho Sex and Public Sex, is explicitly pedophilic in much of her, his literature now. Judith Butler regularly advocates for the destigmatization of incest. Foucault, who's often called the father of queer theory, was potentially a pedophile. We don't really know. But he did sign a petition along with much of the French postmodernists to abolish the age of consent, including for infants, along with Sartre, Derrida, etc. David Evans, another famous queer theorist, and college textbooks and many other theorists advocate for sexual citizenship for children. That's in quotes, and claim that childhood innocence is a myth that actually harms children. FYI, David Evans also laments that prepubescent children aren't sexually active. That really puts Marcuse's Eros and Civilization in a new light, doesn't it? Claim number 2, wokeness is Marxist. This is only a secret to general discourse. Nearly every sociology professor and textbook will state that Karl Marx is the father of critical theory. The first sex education programs were developed by George Lukács in 1919 during the brief Hungarian Marxist Revolution to destroy kind of Gramsci's idea of cultural hegemony of religion and family. Lukács went on to inspire many at the Frankfurt School who explicitly wanted to reframe Marxism into cultural institutions. They called this cultural Marxism, and so did Wikipedia until 2014. But It is here that critical theory is born. Queer theory is Marxism, rebranded to apply to heteronormativity. And just like critical race theory, critical legal studies, critical gender studies, etc., it is anti-capitalist, anti-individualist, and pro-communist. Just ask any critical theorist how they feel about capitalism. Okay, but what about the third claim? I kind of slipped it in, right? That the field of education is overtaken by critical theory. Well, Paulo Freire, father of critical pedagogy, is the number one cited social scientist, period. I'll repeat that. The father of critical pedagogy, an ideology of praxis on how to specifically train people to become literate in critical consciousness to bring about the communist revolution, is the number one cited social scientist with over 480,000 citations. And his Pedagogy of the Oppressed has well over 100,000 citations. To put that in perspective, that's only about 100,000 less than Sigmund Freud, the father of psychology, with none of his works even approaching Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So I think it's very clear that academia is infected with these ideas. Transformative social emotional learning is explicitly designed to destroy individualism and create a critical democracy that is equity focused and anti-capitalist. Well, Second Step brags that they bring social emotional learning to over 16.5 million children annually in elementary school. That's 34% of all U.S. elementary schools. And Second Step openly supports transformative social emotional learning, giving teachers and students resources to push diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, social justice through psychological interventions on your children. SICUS, Sex Education for Social Justice, writes the National Sex Education Standard, adopted by many states. Oh, and they just happened to do a recent conference with Second Step, Ibram X. Kendi, Sumi Cho, and Crenshaw, and they all openly admitted that critical race theory is in your schools and that we need more of it. According to SICUS, 61% of universities require that sexuality classes under gender studies, women's studies programs be taken for a health education degree. These are the same classes that are teaching childhood innocence is a bourgeois myth to prevent child sexual liberation. Yeah, pedagogy in America is fucked. So, given that education is seemingly full of leftists using psychological interventions to indoctrinate your children into an ideology that is pro-pedophilia, so long as it brings about the destruction of cultural hegemony, and Marxist, do you have a better word for the people who run cover for this than groomers? I doubt it. See, the real problem is that right-wingers are starting to wake up, and they're kind of seeing what's happening. And worse, they found a word that gets under the left's skin. Just like the decade of being screamed at that you're a fascist, a Nazi, a bigot, a xenophobe, a racist, an ableist, or you're fat-phobic. Except this one works. Groomer.
Okay, thank you so much, Fabian, for that opening statement, and we will go ahead and move to the open discussion. But before we do that, I just want to let everybody know, especially if it's your first time joining us here at Modern Day Debate, that we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics, and we want you to feel welcome no matter what walk of life you're from. And if you have a question or a comment for one of tonight's debaters, fire into the old live chat and be sure to tag me at Modern Day Debate. Super chats go to the top of the list. All we ask is that you please keep it civil, attack the argument and not the person, as insults will not be read. And that goes for the general discourse in the live chat as well. Our guests are linked in the description below, whether you're listening on YouTube or via the podcast on our many platforms. So click the links if you like what you're hearing, and hit the subscribe button because we have plenty more debates coming that you don't want to miss, including, let me just pull that up real quick. Sorry. We have Daniel Hakikachu versus Michael Jones coming up, and Alex Stein versus Hunter Avalone. Those debates are in the works, so please hit the subscribe button if you want to check those out. And with that, we will go. And oh, by the way, going to be planning an after show open mic debate discussion after the show tonight. So if you guys want to continue the conversation there, both of the debaters are invited, so maybe they will join us, and then you guys can continue to break them with your questions. So with that, we will go ahead and kick it into the open discussion. Gentlemen, at your first word, the floor is all yours.
Okay, I have two big questions. I guess I'm still a little bit confused. Talk to me like I'm an idiot. Is grooming about pedophilia or not? You kind of like... The first part of your opening statement was about how grooming actually, it's not linked to pedophilia. That's not how you're using it. But then like half of the rest of your opening statement was trying to connect wokeness to pedophilia. So is pedophilia a part of grooming or not?
Yeah, so the problem here, I think, is that is maybe you missed the portion where I'm talking about the philosophy, right? So yeah, there's a connotation of pedophilia there, but it's not necessarily.
So it is. So
when
grooming
directed-
is definitionally like it involves it as a sexual connotation. That's
well,
what everybody
so-
uses it as. That's what you know it as. That's what the entire
Right,
chat
right.
knows
So-
it as. That's
so
why.
it's
That's
not-
why you're using it, and that's why you went on
Okay,
this long
relax.
soliloquy, like connecting it to pedophilia.
Relax. Okay, relax. So you told me to explain it to you like a child. So listen,
Yeah, do
like
it.
a child. So there's a difference between an individual insult accusing that individual of pedophilia, right, as opposed to calling someone a groomer because they instantiate a philosophy that is wrapped up in pedophilia, or at the very least, the destruction of the barriers that protect children, right? So when someone is a queer theorist and they're actively supporting queer theory, right, they're actively supporting ideas such as getting rid of the bourgeois mythology of child innocence and using Freudian cult indoctrination against your children to destroy their ability to categorize things. So it's both political and sexual grooming in a way that can be utilized by bad actors, especially, you know.
Okay, so you are using grooming. You are intentionally like letting people know that as part of grooming, the pedophilia, the sexual connotations are a necessary component of fully understanding what you mean when you say groomer. That brings me to my next question, and this is the problem that all conspiracy theorists have. There's this grand conspiracy that is like top down, and it's like in its only evil motives, it's Saturday morning cartoon villain motives to destroy capitalism and infect the West. That would require like an amount of coordination that should mean that we're like on top of the fucking world. Like we should be able to control everything. And the problem you're running into is I gave a reasonable, what I think is a very reasonable goal for my what I want in society. All right. So and I can't answer for all these.
You're against the philosophy. So there's two problems with that. Right?
No.
Number
Okay,
one-
now, I want you to address like. Tell me
No,
if
no,
this is like
no,
woke,
let me-
tell me
no,
tell me if this
before
is
we
woke
pivot. No,
ideology,
before we
and tell me
pivot.
if this
Give
is
me- no,
grooming. Like,
you're
do you remember
pivoting.
part of my
Can I-
opening
let
statement
me
where I said
respond?
like I
No,
want you
there-
to see us as people?
You're pivoting.
I'm not pivoting.
Let me just
I'm not
let me
pivoting.
just point out these
I'm
two
not
things.
pivoting. I'm dismissing.
No, I'm about
dismissing
to-
the conspiracy theory angle, and I want
Okay,
to ask
guys.
you a direct question.
Right. So let me just respond to the first part, right? So the first problem is that you don't need a conspiracy theory when like interests align, right? It's a great George Carlin quote. I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy theory. I'm saying that there is a philosophy that is promulgated, that is being brought forward. That's critical consciousness, right? So I'm talking about a philosophy. You're saying it's a conspiracy theory. I've not laid forward any conspiracy thus so far. So you accuse me of something that you can't prove because I've yet to state a single conspiracy.
So you're saying that there's this coordinated effort, that all of this stuff that we're talking about, what right-wingers typically describe as grooming, it's all part of this coordinated effort, and you really made it seem like it's coming from like these philosophers who believe things that I'm a little bit tenuous. I don't know if I trust your description of them.
I can quote if you want.
But as part of my opening statement, I gave what I thought was a reasonable outcome for society that I want. I can only answer for myself.
But you
right?
go against.
So no.
you go
I
against
want
the
you to
philosophy. But you're wrong.
answer this question.
You
I
don't
want you to
understand
answer-
queer theory.
Hold on,
You're
Fabian.
wrong.
Let's let him finish
want
his
you-
thought. Let's let him finish his thought, Fabian.
Yeah, so like,
that's
how
fine.
about you talk to me? I can't answer for all the queer theorists, and you can tell me if this is queer theory or not. But remember the part of my opening statement? Like, what part of that do you think was grooming? Like, specifically the part where I was like, if you saw us as people, you'd see we have a perfectly reasonable and moral reason for wanting to normalize queer identities in society.
Yeah,
And-
that goes against. So that's a talking point that shields the lie of the philosophy, right? So when we
So
look
I'm
at, like,
trying to shield the lie of the philosophy that I secretly believe in when I do that. See, this is
Yeah,
what I was
so-
talking about. It can't. That seems too reasonable, so it has to be this like weird conspiracy theory where
No.
we want to like
You just
like,
don't
introduce
understand.
pedophilia
You
into
just don't know what you're
society.
talking about. You don't understand what you're talking.
I'm talking
So let
about
me-
my reasoning. I do
Okay,
know what my reasoning
your
is.
reason-
And I want you
yeah,
to
you-
address that.
Okay.
You can't.
Okay, you keep talking over me because you realize that I know what I'm talking about and you don't. So just
No.
relax for a second. Take a deep
I'm
breath.
talking
and
about
let
my
me
reasoning.
explain
I want
to
you
you why
to
you're
address
wrong.
that. I want you.
Right.
No, why am I wrong with my
Okay,
reasoning?
hold on, Jangles.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, go ahead. Fabian,
Let me
answer that
speak.
question. Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, when you say that you claim a group thing that we're asking for. Now, if you as an individual just want people to accept individuals for who they are, congratulations. You should join the libertarians, right? And you should fight against grooming, right? And you should fight against the left, because it's the left and the queer theorists, such as like David Halperin, right? That says that queer theory is an identity without an essence, okay? This is a common aspect of all of the academic literature, is that queer theory is about abolishing any form of rigidity or any categorization whatsoever. They don't want you, and the theory and the philosophy does not want you identified as a gay man. It wants to be gender abolitionist and abolitionist on all forms of identity. That is what the philosophy promulgates, and that is the entire point of adding all of these additional categories.
So, no, there's a lot of disagreement in queer ideology. Like, queer theorists are not going to say, like, no, you can't identify as a gay man. They're not just straight up not going to say that. It's not that centralized. There's a lot of disagreement. And again, I can't answer for these, like, what these esoteric people who no one's ever fucking heard of that are apparently still influencing society. I want you to address what I'm thinking.
He has 10,000 citations. It's not someone who's never heard of.
10,000 citations.
So
I know, but you think like all like the drag queens know that? Do you think that when like the right wingers are accusing people of being grooming, they're aware of all this shit? No, they're not. I want you to address what I was saying. So, for example, like, would it be malicious? How about this?
Well, you asked me a question.
Would it be malicious to have?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, here's the actual question I'm asking. All right.
Oh, okay.
Would
So
it
a
be
different
malicious?
Question. Pivot
would
from
it be
the question
malicious
that you use
would it
as
be
an
malicious
attack.
to show pride flags to kids? Is that malicious?
So again, you have to talk about like you're taking an individual action, which is what I knew that you would do, right? Which is what you're trying to do is you're trying to isolate things from the philosophy.
And you're trying to make it a part of
the
you can't answer why that's wrong, so you have to make it a part of the conspiracy.
It depends upon the context. Like what is like what's happening? Who is the person? Why are they doing the person? Right?
Sure.
So for example, we can talk about Freirean concepts, right? So are they utilizing the flag as a means of conscientiation, right? Are they trying to decodify by putting forward the flag? Right? Or is it just like, hey, this person likes gay rights and like they don't do anything about it? Or
one of those
are they
is
using
reasonable to
generative
assume and
concepts?
the other one's not.
Yeah, except that's not true. Like your inability to know anything about the philosophy or know anything about what's going on in this country, and and when I mention people that are extremely cited in queer theory, and you prove that you didn't prepare for this debate, doesn't mean that you can just play stupid and act like I'm a conspiracy theorist when you've still yet to demonstrate a single conspiracy that I've put forward.
The conspiracy is that you're trying to make all these, like, you don't want to talk about individual instances. I think that's part of the big thing. Like, so when you have something innocuous like a pride flag in
We
the classroom,
can.
No,
I think it's a distraction from the problem.
No, it's a distraction from the problem because I'm actually making you
point.
substantiate what you're trying to like prove in some sort of like grand plan that we have to
substantiate-
overthrow America.
I've overwhelmingly
So when I'm talking
substantiated
about like
with
these
my opening
individual
statement.
instances,
Hold
I
on,
want to
let
know
Jangles
like
finish his
the
point.
things that people
34% of all elementary schools. Like I've
Hold on,
overwhelmingly
Fabian.
substantiated.
Hold on, Fabian, hold on. Okay, Jangles, go ahead.
Okay, the things that people call grooming that I see all the time from right wingers are not that fucking complicated. All right, it's like when a character in a Disney movie, the new one, that's gay. That's grooming now. That's sexualizing kids. Okay, can we start from there? That's ridiculous. That's not grooming kids, right?
No, I don't give right. So again,
Fantastic.
So,
that's great.
No, so one of the problem is that conservatives are reacting to something that they don't quite understand. Right? They don't really. Most normies and most people, they have a set of values and they have a set of deontological beliefs, right? And so if you cross their values in some way, they react, right? This is why, pardon me using a Marxist term, kind of inappropriately, but this is why people call the right reactionary, right? Is that they see people attacking their children in kind of like different areas and they don't understand what's going on, right? And so they've collectively used this word groomer to explain a phenomena that they haven't quite put their finger on the pulse of yet. What I'm doing is I'm showing the finger on the pulse, the philosophy and the ideology that causes some of these ideologically possessed people to do the crazy shit you see on libs of TikTok, right?
Okay, so just to be clear, the gay character in the Disney movie, that's not grooming. It's ridiculous to say that it is, right? It's a stupid thing to say. It's not sexualizing kids.
It depends upon the instance, but can't think of any from like Disney recently that's like grooming. It just looks like woke people making woke movies.
Why is it woke to include a gay character in a movie?
It's not woke to include a gay character. It depends on
so
why.
why
So
is it
I'll give you an
woke?
example.
So what makes it woke?
So like Onward, right? I remember I was watching Onward and like I saw like Geeks and Gamers and some other conservative people and they were like, "Oh, Onward's got this woke scene," and I watched the scene with my kids and it's like, a lesbian cop brings up the fact that she has a wife. And I'm like, this is just a lesbian existing. Like, this isn't fucking grooming, right?
Excellent.
Right? But then there are other examples, right? Not necessarily with Disney, right? But like where you can see something and it's so laden with philosophy. You can see that there's like all, like, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of like a good like feminist TV program, like Supergirl, right? You watch Supergirl and it's just like feminist rhetoric is in every fucking episode, right?
What does
and
feminist
like,
rhetoric look like?
Girl.
Yeah, she's the boss. Like, it's trying to like show that like traditionally women have been like dissuaded from taking positions of power. They've been told that they're weak. They're been told to be subservient to it. You know, varying degrees in society. And there is a feminist message to say that no, they can take charge. They can be the hero of their own stories.
Right. So you recognize that there's a political message in it, and like,
but I don't know why that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean,
why
like,
is it bad to like empower women?
Taking like, you know, mapping the margins, right, and things like that. Like, yeah, obviously the personal is political. Why it's a bad thing is in a media that you can choose to watch or not watch. It's not like, you want to watch Supergirl, watch Supergirl. If you don't want to watch Supergirl, don't fucking watch Supergirl. But when you're talking about people in public education, right, that are being specifically targeted by cult indoctrination techniques.
Not letting you do that. No, right? I am interrupting. Cult indoctrination techniques. Come on, that's a loaded term. Yeah, that's not being fair. That's not a good.
Oh no, I'm being
effort to have
totally
discussion.
fair. That's what social emotional learning is.
It's not a cult.
Cult indoctrination.
You can disagree with it without it being a cult. That's actually
it's literally cult indoctrination technique.
It's literally not. It's literally.
Would you like me to explain how it is?
Sure, yeah, because it's going to say something that you really, really disagree with, and you're going to have some like huge conspiracy nonsense to back it up, like you have for the past.
No. Like, so all you need to do is like read the research on transformative social emotional learning, right, and recognize that transformative social emotional learning is engaged specifically to destroy capitalism, to create a quote critical democracy, to destroy ideas of individualism and bias, and to inform and educate everyone.
Look how far you're going.
Right? No, I'm literally just quoting highly cited research.
To destroy capitalism, over 300. To like
it's literally in the research.
Society.
Want me to link it to you? Want me to link it to you?
Yeah. Tell me where like they want to like destroy society.
Yeah, cool.
Or whatever. Like, yeah, because this is where like the big red flag. Why I just can't take this conspiracy nonsense seriously. It's Saturday morning cartoon villain logic. Like, we want to be evil to
it's evil. Literally here.
We want to be like, you literally accuse like my entire side, the woke side, whatever the fuck that is, of being inherently pedophilic. No, what the fuck? No.
Yeah, and then I backed it up with tons of fucking
no one is actually
proof.
Advocating for pedophilia to be normalized and legalized. They're not.
They are. So hold on.
No, they're not.
Let's go with that.
Not in public discourse.
I'm going to quote research with over 1,300 citations.
Bring up the research.
All right. So quoting from David Evans from his Sexual Citizenship, the material construction of sexualities by David Evans, chapter 8, embryonic sexual citizenship. He specifically goes into let's see. Let me find it. Most arguably, Aries argued that within the sociability of the pre-capitalist machinery of alliance, children were integral participants in adult life. As soon as the child could live without the constant solicitude of his mother, his nanny, or his cradle rocker, he belonged to society. Likewise, by the age of 10, girls were already little women, both with their corresponding rights and responsibilities. Others have disagreed, arguing that such definitions of the non-child were restricted to the nobility, and for that great majority of space. We can look at that. We can look at
what about that? Like, what about that was supporting your point?
That's just read all the fucking research, right?
Yeah, that was just you were supposed to bring up.
I mean, when you read
really
paragraph through paragraph,
your point. What you read up was just descriptively true. Yeah, it was a lot more normal back in the day, in the early industrial age, to sexualize children way too early. We've moved past that, and it's good that we've moved past that. It's good that we're not sexualizing children and expecting them to have families at 12 years old.
Gail Rubin, 1978, in Leaping Lesbian, right? This is the person that wrote Thinking Sex, right? Which is the foundational document for queer theory. Here we go. Youth liberation has argued for some time that young people should have the right to have sex as well as not to have it, and with whom they choose. The statutory structure of the sex laws has been identified as oppressive and insulting to young people. A range of sexual activities are legally defined as molestation, regardless of the quality of the relationship or the amount of consent involved. The recent career of boy love in the public mind should serve as an alert that the self-interests of the feminist and gay movements are linked to simple justice for stigmatized sexual minorities. We must not reject all sexual contact between adults and young people as inherently oppressive.
Sweet, that's stupid. No one thinks that.
Except it's the
no one
in the modern
context
of fucking queer theory.
There's nothing there's no single founder of queer theory. Yeah, that's a stupid thing for that person to say. All right, and yeah, that absolutely is something that I do not agree with. The problem that you're running into is that
so you want to look at modern examples?
No, so who is arguing that
today?
Let
him respond to your
yeah, dude, how is that coming up today? A lot of people this is why it's so fucking hard to talk about that, is because any time that again, if we introduce kids to the concept that being trans is a thing or that being gay is a thing, now people accuse that of being pedophilic. That's the problem we're having. That shit, what you just said, that fucking sucks. That's not what the national conversation is. The national conversation is things that would be normal if they were, I know you hate this word, cis heteronormative, now all of a sudden are inherently sexual and deviant and exploitative of children. So,
yeah, no,
that's the problem that we're running into.
Theory represents. Again, over and over again.
We're not debating queer theory. We're debating the groomer's slur.
Yes, we're debating the philosophy that is being instantiated in our schools via social.
You think that the ultimate goal of this is to get children to have sex with adults? Is that the implication?
I think the ultimate goal is to weaken the children's ability to categorize things meaningfully, so that through a Freirean system, people can develop the philosophy. Right, that can teach the philosophy, which requires the destruction of cultural hegemonies, like Antonio Gramsci laid out. They have to.
What cultural hegemony are we destructing? Are we destroying?
So you have to go after. The 5 main categories of cultural hegemony would be religion, family, education, media, and law.
Let's go one by one. Okay, so let's talk about religion. Let's go one by one.
Media.
Okay, let's go one by one. Religion. How are we destroying religion?
I didn't say that we're destroying religion. I'm saying that the philosophy, in order to be able to propagate fully, has to go into these cultural hegemonies.
Yeah, you're making the case that we're trying to destroy all those things. One, let's talk about religion. How are we destroying religion? It seems like the attacks on religion today is like you can't discriminate against gay people. That's what the national conversation is. That's construed as an attack on religion. I don't buy that for a second. Said the family. Who's trying to destroy families? No one wants to separate healthy, happy families. No one wants to have kids grow up without parents. In fact, the queer side of things wants more parents. No, we both know that. What the? No, we're not trying to destroy families.
Fair enough.
Hashtag not all. All right, so we want to make more families. We want queer people to be able to adopt and raise kids like we've been doing for a while. And
stop saying queer people, right? It's an identity without an essence, right?
Identity without it just means non-cis heteronormative, and I know you hate that word, but that's what queer, the umbrella term, means.
Right, but it's a lack of a category, right? So it's not
it's
an
a lack.
It's like you.
It's like saying atheist is a lack of a category.
No, atheism is a rejection of a category.
Okay, so it's so queer is just not cis heteronormative. So you know what cis is, right?
Yeah.
You know what cisgender means? Sort of, yeah. Cisgender, you identify with the sex you were assigned at birth. That's what cisgender is. Trans will be not that. Okay. Heteronormative, that means like you're not attracted to the opposite sex. That's what that means. Yeah. And so that's an umbrella term for all of these people. And these people are normal. These are normal aspects of human variation. And it seems like the grooming has to do with like introducing children to the concept that these people exist and that it's normal and it's not dangerous and you're not a deviant if you end up being gay or trans or any other flavor. That's all that we're trying to do. And we're being accused of like sexually wanting to exploit children, being pedophiles for this, huh? Because I do. I want to
promulgate
a
philosophy that wants to sexually exploit children.
No, I don't.
Exploit children. Yes, you do.
No, I don't. No,
you do.
This is how weak your arguments are. You have to pretend that I hold views that I don't.
What do you mean how weak my arguments are? You haven't addressed any of my shit. You've just been gish galloping and freaking out the entire time.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, man, I'm trying to get you to answer like specific questions about what my beliefs are. What are the problems with my beliefs that you have? I told you, I want to normalize queer identities. A lot of people would already say that that's grooming.
Queer identity is already a problem because it's a loaded term in a philosophy that is ultimately destructive towards our children's ability to be able to meaningfully have categories, individualism.
You know what's really fucking destructive and anti-individualist? Like conversion therapy, keeping kids, like teaching kids that being gay is actually evil.
Conversion therapy? Will you stop pretending I'm some weird Republican you're debating against and actually debate the issues that you're too afraid of?
I'm very afraid. That's why I agreed to the debate. So how do we, you know what, maybe I'll ask you, what is the healthy way to let kids identify as gay or trans and let them become gay or trans if that's what they're meant to be? What's the healthy way of making sure
What
that they're
is
not
the healthy-
suppressed?
Can you make your question like meaningful? Like, what is, like, do I have to describe the entire development of a child from like?
Yeah, I want to know what the good version is. You told me what the evil version is. How do we make sure that kids who are going to grow up to be gay or are going to grow up to be trans, how do we make sure that they don't feel ostracized? How do we make sure that
You
we're not
let
suppressing?
them be gay.
I agree. Now, how do we make sure that that's happening? Because there's still a lot of people in society that demonize queer folk, that demonize trans people, that demonize gay people.
You win the argument, but it has nothing to do with what's going on in schools and has nothing to do with any of the philosophy of critical pedagogy, which is the dominant form of education philosophy in our country currently.
Okay, so do you agree with the Don't Say Gay bill in Texas? In Texas, well, I guess there's a version in Texas. It started in Florida. Do you agree with the Don't Say Gay bill there?
I think that the Don't Say Gay bill has issues in that, like I like the idea that conservatives are attempting to wake up. I think it's ultimately toothless. And I'm against the state in most regards. So like, I don't know, like 50-50, maybe like 70-30 agree with me.
Okay, so the impetus behind that, as stated by his press secretary, was it's an anti-groomer bill, and it makes the argument specifically that introducing gay or trans people to under the age of whatever the third grade is.
Kindergarten, first and second grade.
Yeah, that's somehow grooming them into what? Is tricking them to be gay? Is tricking them to be trans? Or more likely, what the actual connotation of grooming means?
That's
what
not
the actual
what the bill
connotation
is.
of grooming
So
means is somehow
now-
like indoctrinate them to like be
No.
sexually exploited by teachers.
Right, you're trying to dominate the conversation with your examples because you can't deal with any of the facts that I laid out in the philosophy. But then you're bringing up the Don't Say Gay bill, and now you've already lied about what the Don't Say Gay bill is actually saying. You're allowed to say you're gay. You're allowed to say you have a husband. What you're not allowed to do is create lesson plans for first graders, second graders, and kindergartners around gender identity and sexual orientation. So why are you lying about the own example you tried to own me with?
Okay, let's see if you're willing to tell the truth.
Because you're too much of a pussy to talk about the actual problem.
If we had a reading assignment in second grade that involved two husbands, do you think that parents would say that that's in violation of the Don't Say Gay bill?
Some parents might say that.
Yeah, and that's
that
one
doesn't
of
make
the
them
things.
right.
If parents make a big fuss about it, that was the big confusion of it. Are these things allowed? And it looks like, I don't know, man. It looks like a lot of parents would say that no, that's
your
sexualizing their kids.
confusion with what's in the bill is not a reason for the bill to be bad, and it's not a reason for you to fucking pivot about the fact that you
what
can't deal with
was
the
it banning then? Hold on, what existed prior to this that it was banning then? It was what was it fixing?
Predominantly, what it was fixing is the fact that guidance counselors and school officials were able to, without any onus of any actual abuse occurring or potential abuse occurring, were able to hide the gender identity and social transition of children from parents. That was the major thing in the bill.
That's a really good one to focus on because that's a big accusation of grooming. All right.
I know this is the pivot you want, but I'll go with you. It's fine.
It's not the pivot I want. Like you're saying a thousand things. I have to address one of them. So the hiding the trans identity, or I guess it would also apply to like gay, but that young probably trans identities. Do you know why that queer identities are unique in terms of like other marginalized groups? It's because we're typically born into families that are straight, that are cis, that aren't necessarily equipped to accept
because you're an outlier, right? Like it would be really,
because we're
unlikely
just
to
less
have queer
common.
parents with queer kids. I mean,
I know that does happen, but it's a lot less likely to happen. And so do you is it not more reasonable to assume that a kid hasn't told their parents because they're scared? And maybe they're looking for support for the other adults in their life?
It is unreasonable. It is, you asked me a question, right? Like, relax for a second.
You gotta let me finish, man.
Well, then don't ask me a fucking question and then ask other leading questions and more questions, right?
I'm not done with the question. Okay, go.
Right, they're rhetorical questions that you're trying to slip in, hoping that you get a jab with a question. So just finish the fucking question.
Cool. What do you think is more likely in a typical scenario? Of course, there's going to be exceptions. Do you think it's more likely that a kid is hiding the fact that they're trans from their parents because they think the parents are going to reject them and they're seeking comfort with the teacher, the other adult in their life? Or do you think it's some sort of indoctrination cult that is trying to pull kids away from their parents? What do you think is more likely in a typical scenario?
Boy, I don't know what you mean by a typical scenario. If we're talking about California, where the rates are like 20 times higher than they were only a few years ago, then it's more likely that they've been indoctrinated.
No, it's more accepted there. We've seen an explosion.
No,
in
I'm saying
I'm
simply saying that when you have a social contagion that is in certain areas where there's so much of these indoctrination and cult indoctrination that's occurring from teachers, yeah, you're going to see this massive
accusing me of loaded language. It's cult indoctrination, social
Well,
contagion.
you actually
Seriously?
wouldn't let me answer that question. You just dismissed it, and I said I have proof of it.
Yeah, what's the proof of social indoctrination? Sure.
Right,
You say
so,
that the rates are
again-
rising. I have a theory for why the rates are rising. I think it's becoming more accepted, and so people are more free to
Right.
identify as that.
So
now,
you believe?
is that
you
reasonable to believe?
Shh, Jesus fucking Christ! How many things do you want to talk about at the same time? Right. So first of all, you believe that like in areas where it's like 40% or higher, where individuals are identifying as non-binary, and LGBTQ, right? That's just the representation. It's more accepted. So throughout all of human history, some extremely large minority of people were non-binary, trans, queer folk. Like, that's silly. But in terms of the indoctrination, the proof of that,
That's
right?
silly.
All you need to do is look at CASEL, and look at the standards in social emotional learning, and look at how they teach teachers. And one of the things that they teach is they specifically teach just a kind of rebranding of Freirean tactics, right? Which is to find a generative theme, right? Take that generative theme, such as gender or something, right? Find out where the conflict is there, and then codify it or decodify it, bicodify it, and then make that theme problematic, and then you can create critical awareness and critical consciousness. The way they do it in social emotional learning, and they openly admit, is that what they do is they focus on individuals, especially individuals that have been marked by the systems, because they take tests to find who to target. And then they target them and they pull them into what they call the fear zone, right? And what they do is they try and bring forward their biases. They try and bring forward their privilege and oppression and the way that they're like, and their identity statuses, and then put them in front of classmates through a struggle session. And they say, once you break through the fear zone, then you go into the learning zone. And they specifically, and the literature specifically talks about how you can create a critical democracy with this. You just got to read the literature, man.
It's not that fucking complicated, dude. It really isn't. All right.
I mean, it's
Queer
right
kids-
there.
No, trans kids have existed way before all of this, like social emotional learning stuff happened.
Nobody's
In
saying
fact,
trans
a lot of that
kids
is a
don't
response
exist.
to them. A lot of that is a response to them. You just dismiss the notion that like an increased acceptance can cause an increase in identity. That's you just
I didn't dismiss
dismiss
that. I didn't dismiss that. That's a lie. I dismissed that it would,
you're on
that it would
video,
be
dude.
up to 40%.
In
right?
40% where? I've never heard that statistic. 40% of
California,
like
Gen Z in California.
Gen Z of California are identifying as like some sort of queer identity, most of which are non-binary and bisexual.
Yeah, most
Which
are
is
NB,
completely normal
queer,
things to do.
Bisexual.
Yeah, so we've otherwise like these
That's
people
right.
would-
You're saying that's normal. You're saying that like
It is.
only 60% of people are straight and
100%
40%
maybe,
belong
yeah.
to some other category.
I think if there was absolutely no social
saying
stigma
that's a
whatsoever,
bold
yeah, you'd have a
claim. You
lot
should
of
back
you
it
could have a
up.
lot more people naturally
up everything
identifying
I
as
claim.
non-binary
Oh,
or
okay, I understand what you guys are saying. Hold on.
I think if there was absolutely no social stigma against queer identities, yeah, you'd see a lot of people identifying as bi or pansexual or even non-binary. Yeah, that's a normal thing to expect. This notion that it's actually normal for that what happened in the past that was normal, that is ludicrous to me. Like for the vast majority of human history, all these identities were suppressed by the state, sometimes under penalty of like severe punishments, like death sentences. And we see all have death sentences for queer identities in a lot of the world. To act like, and all we're doing is lightly lifting those restrictions. That's all this
That's
quote
not what
unquote
you're
indoctrination grooming is. Really, no, that really
That's
is
a lie.
it. We're not trying to trick cis kids into being trans. Why would we do that? What is non-Saturday morning cartoon villain logic could you possibly have for us
Jesus
wanting
Christ.
to do that?
So many straw mans and such energy, right?
Yeah.
So nobody made the claim that you're making. I've never said that they're attempting to indoctrinate your kid into being trans. What I said is that they're engaged in trying to promulgate a philosophy that they themselves believe in, critical consciousness, and that this is harmful to children. It confuses children. And I think that there's obviously an environmental factor to both sexuality as well as identity.
I don't know if you know what you're talking about. When you imply that there's a social contagion, you are absolutely trying to imply that they're tricking kids into being identities that they otherwise wouldn't be. That's exactly what you're doing. That's what social contagion means. You're like, that's exactly what you're implying. I don't know why.
That's not what I'm
you
implying.
Can't see that. Absolutely.
Like, you're just making up
when
shit.
You
You don't
bring
know
up like
anything
40%
about
of
this
Gen
theory or
Z
philosophy.
have these queer
Okay, we
identities.
can't
You're
understand
trying to
you
make it
guys.
seem like it's not natural, that we are like we are influencing these kids to identify as something that they're truly not. No, that's not it, man. You are making the case that it's a social contagion.
I'm making the
That's
case
what
that
that
it's
means.
a social contagion. A social contagion recognizes that there's some environmental factor. That does not mean what you're claiming it means, which is that I'm
contagion
claiming,
is not a neutral term. If it's environmental factors,
Hold on, Jangles.
sure.
Jangles, let's let
All right.
Fabian finish his thought. Hold on.
I get that you're triggered, but you don't understand what you're talking
I'm
about.
very triggered,
So
man. I'm so
you're
mad.
straw manning me by saying that I'm saying that these teachers or that social emotional learning is attempting to quote unquote trans the kids, right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that they're attempting to get them to destroy the understanding of categories, that they're attempting to create critical consciousness, and that this has effects. That's not the same thing as trying to make a kid trans. What it does is it confuses and harms children and makes them and indoctrinates them into a philosophy that has all types of unintended or intended consequences, one of which might be an increase in the rate of self-identification, especially with young girls.
So when you say social contagion, that's not a neutral term. You flip-flopped and said that no, it's just talking about environmental
didn't
factors.
flip-flop.
And then
I just explained
no, and
how
you
you're
said it's
strawmanning.
environmental factors. If
Hold
we're
on,
talking about
Jangles,
environmental
go ahead.
factors as a factor in this increase in identity, I absolutely agree with it. I like to explain it by an increase in acceptance, and you had to like pivot to this like weird, it's cult indoctrination, like all this loaded language. You're pretending like I'm strawmanning you, but no, you had this super loaded evil language. And I go back to this again. The purpose is apparently Saturday morning cartoon film logic. They just want to destroy capitalism and disrupt society. When you use
If I
words
can
like
prove it.
contagion, that you're impugning it with a negative moral stance. The same reason that
It's-
you're using
yeah,
grooming,
it's
you're trying to
bad.
impugn it with a negative moral stance.
Yes.
And no,
It's evil.
we want increased acceptance. Okay, maybe I'd like to ask this again, and I'm asking you a straight question right here. How do we support trans and gay kids in a way that you would not consider grooming? What would that look like?
Well, I would say, first of all, there's no such thing as a trans kid. There's a kid that has gender dysphoria, right?
That's it.
Trans.
Done.
The only way that you can be a
Debate's over.
trans kid, the only way that you can be a trans kid is if you start transitioning, right? Now, if you talk about socially transitioning, right? I don't actually have much problem with social transition. Given the current context, it's unfortunate that so many kids are put down a really bad path because of this. But in terms of like gender affirming medical care, like androgen therapy, HRT, or like any of the trans affirming surgeries, right? What I guess I would say, like, what the fuck do you mean by trans kid?
Okay, let's walk it back. A trans kid is someone who identifies with a gender they were not assigned at birth. That's what a trans kid is, and they do exist.
Okay, so any
The
kid that
literature
just
supports
says
it.
I'm a boy is a trans
No.
kid.
No,
That's
no,
a girl.
it's a deep-rooted
The
identity.
moment they identify.
Yeah. The second they start to play with a girl, that's exactly what the research says. That's exactly what the queer theorists do. If a boy ever looks at a doll, absolutely not. That's a trans kid. Now, sorry, buddy, you're a girl. Doesn't matter what you identify as. No sort of safeguarding. No medical research to support it. Let's get you on them puberty blockers. Now, who's strawmanning who? Really?
What the fuck are
No,
you
the
talking
literature
about?
is very,
You just
very-
went in your own little fantasy of arguing against Alex Stein. Guess what? I'm not Alex Stein. You have to back
I know
up what the
you're
fuck you said.
somehow worse. At least he was honest. So there are trans kids.
where have I
the
lied?
literature
Where
supports.
have I lied?
In fact, there, like,
called me a
when you
liar.
said that
Where
there's
did I
no
lie?
such thing as a trans kid. No such thing as a trans kid. That's just a dumb thing to say. You said there are kids with gender
So
dysphoria.
that's a lie?
Absolutely.
So can you prove that I don't believe that? That
Sure,
I think
a
that gender
trans-
dysphoria is different?
If you say there's not a trans kid is just a kid who identifies with a gender they weren't assigned at birth. That's what a trans kid is, and those exist. You might not agree
So
with
almost
it, but they
every
absolutely
child has
exist.
been trans. There's
Almost
no such
every
thing
child.
as
No,
non-trans
it's not.
kids?
No, that's the straw manning. It's not a flippant. I feel like a boy now. I feel like a girl. It's not that flippant. There's decades and
let
decades
me
of
help you out
research
since
into
you don't know
this.
what you're talking
no,
about.
there's no. I know what I'm talking
so-
about. And I'm trying to tell you. No, there's decades of research into this. In fact, a lot of like when you
No,
hear like
let me
the
help you
distance
because you don't know what you're
statistics-
talking about.
No, I'm
Can you
trying
just
to
be
show
quiet?
you what I'm
You
talking
don't
about.
understand what you're talking
Hold
about.
on, Fabian. Fabian, let's let Jangles make his point, and then you can show him what you want to show him.
Decades and decades of the gender research that has supported these identities and showed that it is really effective to socially transition, that's shown how important it is for societal and especially family acceptance for these kids to live happy and healthy lives, show that one of the biggest factors that are going to predict a persistence into gender dysphoria and trans identities as an adolescent and adult is early onset gender dysphoria, as early onset identification. And they very, very clearly state that it is language like "I am a girl," and it's consistent and persistent and doesn't seem to be folded by like pure whims. A really good example of this, and something you apparently in our last debate thought was a point in your favor. You know John Money, right?
What about John Money?
John Money had a incorrect theory that all gender was completely blank slate tabula rasa socially constructed. He had that.
He really fucked. He was an evil guy.
Yeah, he fucked up. Absolutely, he fucked up because he was really, really wrong. And what did he do? A kid with a boy with a botched circumcision was raised as a girl, fully raised as a girl, and guess what? He had gender dysphoria. He had what would today be considered gender dysphoria and immense stress that came from it. So no, you cannot construct gender identity out of whole cloth. It is something deeply rooted in biology. That's what all this research says. That's why I know what I'm talking about. I know what the research says. Socially transition can be really, really good for a lot of kids.
Can I go now? You made like 20 points. First
Cool.
of all,
Make
I'll
your
just let you keep John Money as a piece of shit because I don't think it's really helping your side to admit that.
I said he was a piece of shit. I'm agreeing
right.
with
No,
you.
I'm just saying. Yeah, like I'm just saying, like the early research into this. I don't know that it's necessarily helping you, but yeah.
It absolutely helps.
Persistent and consistent gender dysphoria, right? Which is a very, 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 very small percentage of the population, right? Nowhere near this larger group of people that you would say exists within gender, within social contagion, right? You're talking about an incredibly small minority of individuals, right? And then you could maybe say like intersex, right? Which is like 0.018%, right? Like there are certain outliers.
Depends on how you count it, yeah.
Yeah. Some people will come up with this claim of 2%, which is hilarious. But yeah, so when you're talking about persistent and consistent gender dysphoria, again, you're talking about persistent, consistent gender dysphoria. You're not talking about a trans child, right?
Yes,
you're talking about
am.
someone that has gender dysphoria on a consistent,
and they are trans. They identify
basis.
as the other gender. That's what a trans kid is.
They don't have the wherewithal or the mental capacity to be able to identify as trans. They're children. That's why they have
the
guardians.
Research says that you're wrong.
So
I'm sorry.
I want to go back. No, the research.
The research says that you're
I guarantee
wrong,
you, we could go through your research and find all of the fucking problems.
Fuck it. Let's do it. I'll give you my entire.
I know that.
document.
I know that you want to go through with this shit because you've pivoted so fucking hard away from groomers after I've crushed your ass. But let's go. Let's go back a little bit.
You can tell when
right?
someone's winning when they have to say that they're winning.
Well, I mean, I've just made so many points that you refuse to acknowledge, and then you just call conspiracy theory, but you still have yet to prove that anything is a conspiracy. So let's go back, right? Because the question is whether or not we're grooming children into an ideology that does harm in some regard, right? Like that's like originally kind of what we were on.
Sure. And I, the reason
Right.
I'm calling you a conspiracy theorist is because I offered an explanation for why we're doing what we're doing that I think makes a lot more sense than yours. And I really wanted you to say like why my explanation for why we're doing what we're doing is incorrect, why it's grooming.
It's very simple. So I'll just give one of many of the things I stated in my opening statement, which is that the number one cited social scientist with over 480,000 citations, over 100,000 citations on pedagogy of the oppressed exists, right? Like that is the overwhelming majority body of research within sociology supports.
And somehow I
critical
came to my
theory and
positions
critical
without
pedagogy.
reading it. I came to my conclusions without reading it. So engage with my positions. Why is what I'm saying grooming?
You're instantiating a philosophy, right?
What philosophy? The philosophy is that I want it to be accepted that queer people exist. It's fine to be gay. It's fine to be trans. That's my philosophy.
If that was your philosophy,
it is.
Then you would be against the very things that I'm against. So it's very clearly not your philosophy. You can say with your words that
you know my
want
philosophy
acceptance,
better than I do. Fantastic.
Right? But what your actions show and what you're debating and supporting is
What
you're
am I
debating
supporting?
and supporting the idea. Well, for example, you said in the last time we had a conversation that there was nothing wrong with teaching kindergarten, first and second graders about gender identity and gender expression, and fourth graders and fifth graders about puberty blockers, androgen therapy.
Sure, let's go those one at a time. Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
So those are CICUS's National Sex Education Standards.
Yeah, so kids already know, like, when they come into kindergarten, they know what gender is. Or at least they have some sort of conception. They might not be able to give you a cogent definition of it, but they know what boys are.
You got a definition now?
They've been called girls. They've seen girls. They've seen boys. They've seen all that stuff.
Now?
Like, it's not this new information.
You couldn't define it before. Remember, you
really?
gave me
Okay, I can define it now. You want me to define gender for you? I got a lot of definitions. Which one you want?
I would hope that you prepared something, right?
Yeah, from Oxford. Either of the two sexes, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. The term is also used more broadly to denote a range of identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. Yeah, there's gender. Right. I don't think it's the point in your favor.
It's
that,
a meaningless definition.
A meaningless definition. So what's your how would you explain gender to a 5-year-old? If they ask you what is a boy?
5-year-old?
Yeah, what's a boy?
I wouldn't try and adequately explain gender to a 5-year-old. So there are boys and girls. I guess that's your failing,
right? They know what, like, they've seen boys, they've seen girls. They know there's some sort of difference there, and they might have questions.
They're able to identify sexes based off of secondary sexual characteristics, and they begin to understand a concept of gender roles based off of kind of what those sexes.
So you're agreeing that those things are, so that they do have the wherewithal to have some sort of like conception of what these things are, and if you were teaching that to them, you would teach it to them in a developmentally appropriate way. I don't know why you thought that was a slam dunk.
Is such a fun little thing that leftists like to do, right? Is they say developmentally appropriate, which is a nice like little scapegoat to people that don't actually understand like Erik Erikson's, sociocultural developmental model, or like Piaget's model. Like they just say the words developmentally appropriate, and then everyone goes, it must be developmentally appropriate, despite the fact that in early adolescence,
you've used the words developmentally inappropriate.
Right.
Is that also like a dog whistle or whatever?
No, like, it's because I'm actually going to explain, right? Like, so despite the fact that in high school, right, this is the critical time in the sociocultural perspective of the developmental model for role confusion versus identity. And this is actually the time. See, the problem is that we'd like to take our adult brains and we like to map our adult brains onto memories of ourselves as a teenager. We like to think that we're a lot more adult when we're a teenager than we actually are. But the central thing that people are struggling with from 14 to like 17 is their identity and how they're going to identify themselves. And if you introduce philosophy that confuses the ability to be able to understand categories or be able to actually meaningfully find themselves, because you're problematizing things and then creating a political critical democracy through your cult indoctrination tactics that are in 1/3 of elementary schools, what you end up doing is you destroy their ability to meaningfully actually be able to develop healthily. So when they say developmentally appropriate, what they really mean is harming your children.
That's the big thing. All right, I caught it in my opening statement. Like, when they say developmentally appropriate, it seems like it has a reasonable meaning, but no, it's actually this insidious meaning. That's what I said. I caught it, clocked it in the fucking opening statement. We have reasonable reasons that we say, but they seem too reasonable. So no, it has to be some, again, conspiracy theory. It has to be some like top-down means of role confusion. We specifically want to make life worse for children for some undisclosed reason.
Right. Again, you keep trying to fall on this conspiracy theory, but you can't prove a conspiracy theory because I'm not putting forward a conspiracy theory.
I'm putting forward reasonable definitions. I'm putting forth reasonable definitions for why I want that seem very, very reasonable. This seem like a much better explanatory reason than what you're putting forth.
All right. So
and you're doing the thing where the reasonable thing can't be true because it's too reasonable. It has to be insidious.
Right. So do you believe that we should get rid of social emotional learning?
No. Based on what I know of it, it's fine.
So now you're unreasonable, right? Because you believe that we should have programs that target individuals that are seen to have too much bias towards individualism or have the wrong racial or sexual identities, that target them specifically, bring them forward, put them in their fear zone, and then use tactics in order to create a critical consciousness in those children so that they can be allies for a critical democracy.
All right, so what does that look like? Okay,
so why do you believe that?
What does that specifically look like? What would that look like if you had like I don't know, we have a fourth grader who said something homophobic. What does that look like for them?
What does that even mean? What do you mean?
I want to know like specifically like what does that look like? Yeah, what does that look like for like a fourth grader? Give me an example of what that would look like in practicality.
What does that look like?
What you just said. Make it make sense. Make it actually apply to a situation.
Social emotional learning is curricula. It's not how you deal with an individual.
So give me an example of it. I want to know what it looks like.
Give me an example of social emotional learning in curricula.
Give me a concrete example of what that looks like.
Yeah, I just described one.
You described it. I want a concrete example. I don't want.
Okay, so you want
philosophy.
Like, you want me to like find like
like
a video camera in the school footage of like.
I don't think it's
social
unreasonable.
Emotional learning going.
I don't think it's
just go
unreasonable to
step.
expect you to substantiate like your point with an example.
Just
this
go to
broad
just go
philosophical
to
discussion
just,
is not
like I said.
useful.
Just go to second step, secondstep.com.
Cool. All right. I guess I'll do that. It seems like you should have had an example
I'm
of
saying
what that looks like in
go
practice.
to second step. You can see their curriculum and like what it is that they're teaching.
It seems like you should have had
how they
that
support
on hand.
diversity, equity. What are you talking about?
Because I want to know like what it looks like. I had this feeling that you'd be talking like in broad generalities that have insidious connotations behind them, and you have. And when I try to look like, okay, so what does that look like on? What does that look like as a single assignment?
Second step has computer programs, right, that they put into classroom where they test you based off of your like empathy rating. Sorry, my co-host like gave me a note. I was like, yeah, like it says go for the jugular. He's mad at me for saying, no, we're good. No, second step has what they do is they bring in computer programming so that they can do psychometric tests on your children, right? And then what they do is they try and find out who's like lacking, how they define empathy, which really just is kind of redefined within the critical consciousness perspective that they have, so that teachers can then be can then have the resources so that they can go specifically towards that child and try and improve their scores by the end of the year by developing like greater understanding of allyship, progressive political values, more belief in like collective things. They have resources so that they can train like anti-racism for these children and things like that, so that they can specifically change their opinion throughout the school year to more align with like a critical theory perspective or like a progressive or woke ideas, right?
Sure. So one of those ideas would be like homophobia is still a thing in society, and we want to implement steps in order to reduce it. I want to know what that looks like, and what does that look like that is this bad thing that you're describing?
Let me find one. Right. So here's some resources that Second Step has in terms of their support. Committed to addressing racial injustice and helping drive real change in the school communities, a focus on transformative social emotional learning. Which, if you read, the article that I sent you, right, that has over 300 citations. That was like the first idea of like what is TSEL, right? And so like some of the resources that they have is the National Equity Project. So this is for school districts and administrators, right? National Equity Program, CASEL framework, National Technical Assistance Center on Positive Behavior Interventions, right? So again, teachers are doing psychological interventions that they're not really trained for and engaging in things that only counselors and therapists should be doing. Coaching on equity, conversations that change practice, anti-Semitism uncovered, the Anti-Defamation League. And then so some resources for educators, addressing anti-Asian racism with students so that they can teach anti-racism, like critical race theory in school.
Okay, if racism against Asians was a problem, what is wrong with like trying to instruct kids to have more empathy and not be racist anymore?
Well, there's a big difference between trying to have kids not be racist. First of all, you shouldn't be trying to train children with psychological interventions that you're not trained to do on children. Like, you're more likely to
basic
cause
human
problems.
empathy. It can require basic human
that's just
empathy.
not like, no, you don't create school curricula to get unqualified teachers to engage in what counselors and therapists should.
Even
if they were trained to do that, right? There's a big difference between training empathy or training someone to like not be racist versus training anti-racism, right? Like anti-racist baby, Ibram X. Kendi, right? Like what we understand, what anti-racism is critical race theory. It's not liberalism. It's not like just accept us for who we are, right? You keep talking about like these identities, but again, what is being promulgated is not the acceptance of identities. It's over and over again. I don't know how much I have to say this. The research in all of academia is that it's an identity without an essence.
It's not. identity. Like we have a very strong idea of what a trans person is. It could be an umbrella term, but there's like we have.
You're just denying the literature.
I'm not denying the literature. You're trying to make it out as insidious when no, gay men are a thing, lesbians are a thing, trans women are a thing, trans men are a thing, non-binary people are a thing. All of those have, flexible definitions, but most definitions are flexible in some way, especially when it comes to something as complex as social identity and categorizations. There's always going to have some wiggle room. And the entire debate has been, I've put forth a reasonable hypothesis is why we're why we're doing what we're doing, and we want to normalize gay identities, normalize trans identities, so it reduces stigma, not only for the kids who are inevitably going to be gay or trans, and the trans kids do exist. I don't know why you want to die on that hill, but also to make it normal for the people around them. Arguably, that's more important. The homophobia is mostly coming from like other kids who do see it as weird. And maybe it,
right.
and maybe,
but you're not engaging with the reality, right? Like you're engaging with the ideas that like
concepts of
we
reality.
On the left, you're engaging with the idea that there is no grooming going on in schools, right? And that conservatives are just in a panic. Except I present to you the massive amounts of evidence and literature and theory of an education system that is ensconced in
and
this
yet
ideology.
could not identify a single example.
I gave you so many resources and shit.
And you couldn't think of a single concrete example. Anyway, Q&A.
So do we have closing statements, or does it just go straight to Q&A?
We would just go into straight to Q&A usually.
That's fine.
If you wanted to take a couple minutes. Okay, great.
No, I mean, I feel like I gave like a massive amount of shit, and you just didn't address any of it and pivoted. So I mean, we're good.
Okay, just to remind everybody, 100% of tonight's super chats are going to be going to the Sexual Assault Center of Counseling and Education, which helps victims of sexual assault, and that link is going to be in the description below, as well as a watchdog rating. So please let those super chats fly. All of that's going to be going to that charity, and you know that James will be very willing to post any kind of receipts that you might request. So with that, let's go ahead and go to the Q&A, and the first question comes in from Destiny's Crack Dealer for $10. They say, remember when Jangles gave a pen to a dude at the conference and equated that to children tipping drag queens?
Yep.
He wants to redefine the world so grooming is normalized.
Sweet, I'm being accused of being a pedophile. I guess, because grooming doesn't have anything to do with being a pedophile, right? Yeah, actually, I'm going to stand by that. Handing someone an object is not akin to sexualizing them. If you hand someone a...
What's in
the context was Alex. The context was like you're tipping someone like a stripper. When that comes to your head, what comes to mind is like shoving dollar bills in G-strings. No, what actually happened was handing a dollar bill to another person, hand to hand. They tried to, and somehow it's more reasonable to say that that's sexualizing kids than it is to accurately describe what it is, which is handing currency to another person.
I mean, I'd have to look at the situation specifically that you're talking about, but I think handing money at like a drag show type situation, something like that, would obviously be sexualizing.
It's not. It's not. No, it's not. It's stupid.
You should really read up on drag pedagogy and like why drag is being put into schools.
You should really be able to specify why drag is inherently sexual.
Yeah, I mean, it's an over-exaggeration of secondary sexual characteristics with a history of sexuality and deviancy, and it's very obvious.
Deviancy, there's that word. There you go, buddy.
No, that's from queer theory,
for $5.
Like, that's what defines it.
From Arcade Outpost for $5, they say children are not being shown that LGBT is a quote-unquote thing. It's advertised as a party that has bonuses you're missing out on if you don't participate.
Sweet. I want that person to like just think about like, how did I become gay? A lifetime of suppression, lifetime of being told it's diseased, it's immoral, it's a sin, it's deviant, and yet still ended up being gay. I don't think these people. I think they're like Scott. They don't think they're like gay kids or gay or trans kids exist, and the only way that you can eventually become gay or trans. What the fuck did you say with
your stupid ass slander? I never said gay kids don't exist.
Okay, you said trans kids don't exist.
I said they're children with gender dysphoria, and that the only way they can be trans is if they go through transition, which is inherently wrong.
So the enormous like amount of suppression and of any sort of queer identity for like the past like centuries and centuries and centuries, all that stuff is normal. But the second it's like, oh, never mind, it's okay. Now all of a sudden that's like showing them that it's a super cool party and tricking kids into what? Again, tricking them into what? How does that like tricking them into being gay, tricking them into being trans? How is that a social contagion by saying that this is an option now? Now it's a social contagion.
Yeah, so I would say that there are instances, obviously, where this is true, right? I mean, we had like the schools in California. I can't remember. I'll have to get back to it. Where they were finding specific children. The emails got leaked from the teachers, and they were finding specific children to target and separate them, and then love bomb them. But like that's like kind of like a special circumstance, right? Like that's not like something that's happening everywhere in America. What I do think is being advertised is a unique victim status and a certain privilege that comes with like adopting a queer bisexual identity. And that's obviously true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're turning the kids gay. I think what we're really you should be focusing on queer, non-binary, and bisexual.
Would you make the argument that queer people have not been victimized in society and are not currently being victimized to some degree? Would you make that argument?
All people are being victimized in society.
Do you think that queer people are uniquely victimized in comparison to non-queer people for being queer?
I think all people, based upon differences,
do you think that queer people are uniquely being victimized on the basis of being queer?
Just like white people are uniquely victimized on the basis of being white, just like black people are victimized on the basis of being black.
Okay, do you think that
being different in any capacity?
Excellent non-answer. You know the answer. The answer is yes, obviously.
Okay, maybe we should move on.
Yeah, it's a stupid question. That's why. I gave you the answer. Because all individuals that have differences are victimized on the basis of their difference. I literally did.
From Surgeon General. Surgeon General has been a member for 1 year. Thank you so much, Surgeon General. For $10, they say, for the Victims Fund, amazing. So thank you again, Surgeon General. And then from Arcade Outpost for $5, they say, throwback to that time, the official Black Lives Matter page talked about abolishing the family and then hastily changed it once people noticed.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. No, it didn't. That's a lie. The traditional nuclear family requirement. That was the operative word in that Black Lives Matter page. They didn't want to abolish the family. They said they wanted to abolish the requirement to live in a nuclear family. So essentially, yes, you can be two dads with a kid. You can be two moms with a kid. That's what it meant. It's weird that it wasn't strong enough on its own. You had to lie about it.
Gotcha. And thank you so much from Captain V for €5. They say, for Scott, what term would you give for the phenomenon of the religious right teaching girls to be subservient to men?
Probably groomer. Yeah.
Got it.
I mean, it depends on the level, right? Like I'd have to look at the actual case, right? But if you're being led through your religion to be like totally subservient, right? Like it depends on what you mean by subservient, but under like those extreme cases, yeah, they're groomed.
Gotcha. And then from Samar Rao for $5, they say, Jangles, why don't we treat dysphoria like other psychiatric disorders? Where does the clinical prescription for transitioning come from?
The research. We do treat it like other disorders. We see what the research tells us and follow the research. And right now, it seems that at least for some children with gender dysphoria, the best option for them is to socially transition and be supported in that identity. Some of those kids are going to do better with puberty blockers. Some are not, and some of those kids who do really well on puberty blockers will eventually take cross-sex hormones, and may eventually, as adults, pursue sex reassignment surgery. That seems what the research says. It's not for everybody, and we're not trying to be flippant about it. We're trying to be very, very careful because detransitioners are a thing. We want to limit the amount of detransitioners. We don't want to harm kids. But this is not new research. Gender dysphoria, or as it used to be known, gender identity disorder, has been studied for a long, long time. This isn't new. This is what the research has been leading us up to.
Can I just interject?
Sure.
Yeah. So no, we don't treat it the way that we do other disorders. It's very difficult for people to suggest, that they use psychological interventions. There's been very limited research on, comparing persistent, consistent gender dysphoria and individuals that,
it's actually a lot of research comparing those two. Entire papers devoted to just that.
Shut the fuck up. So there's terrible forms of there's terrible methodology in a lot of this research. You can see that there's very little interventions compared as a control group. One of the things that we very rarely look into, very limited research on, is cluster B personality disorders, specifically covert vulnerable personality disorder, which is a form of narcissistic personality disorder, and the fact that cluster Bs are extremely high in the individuals that identify as trans. Like there's a ton of problems with the research, and it's very
Yeah, the
difficult
fact
for
that you
people to
just
do it because
the fact that you just suggested a non-interventionist control group shows that you have no business having any say on what the research for any sort of psychological disorder should be.
yeah, I didn't, but that's
You
okay.
didn't. We saw.
No, I'm talking about a control group of non-intervention, and then a control group of psychological intervention.
Yes,
over a
yeah,
period
exactly.
of time, and then a control group of individuals.
So the
that are
control
on
group of
hormone
non-intervention
replacement
would be
therapy.
kids with gender dysphoria where you just don't do anything. Let them suffer. That's what the control group would look like, and there's a reason we haven't done that because it's
You can do
enormously
self.
unethical.
You can do self-report surveys of individuals that have gone through that processing.
And they have done that. They have
Yes,
done it.
but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having another variable where you compare the outcomes of individuals that are identified for, let's say, I don't know, cluster B personality disorders, and they treat those as opposed to automatically putting them into gender-affirming care or trying to get them to pass in some regard in other research. So no, we don't treat it the same. People are terrified of losing their license. They're terrified of the APA or the ACA coming after them. And,
So do you,
it's a
so
lot
do you
of
agree
junk
that like
data and
these
science.
lawsuits that like prevent doctors from pursuing gender affirmative care, do you agree that those are an oversight for the government?
After you
Depends
respond,
on which
Fabian,
ones.
we're gonna move on after Jangles has the last word. Go ahead.
No.
No, I know.
I
I think
asked the question.
I know. I think anybody that is preventing gender affirming care for individuals over 18, such as in Texas, like that's bullshit.
What if
right?
the research
But,
said it was good for under 18? What if the research
Yeah,
says
I'm not a consequentialist because I'm not a leftist. Like I have principles, right? So I don't believe in harming children's bodies physically
We're
and
gonna get into a
permanently
whole new debate.
to someone that
Yeah.
can't.
he's not and he's not
consent.
prepared for it.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. From Tiny Batman for $2, they say, Jangles, a boy is a prepubescent human male.
Mhm.
Okay, and then from Arcade Outpost for $10, they say, people don't have such a preoccupation with teaching grade schoolers about sex and gender when they still haven't figured out lines between fantasy and reality, unless there is an agenda.
Yeah, I told you what the agenda was to normalize it. Just like kids see mommies and daddies, all right, and that's normal and good. That should stay normal. But kids might also start seeing daddies and daddies, or just romantic relationships between two people of the same gender, and we want that to be normal. That's the agenda. Now, does that
The agenda
sound
is
reasonable?
teaching their philosophy.
Yeah,
The
no.
philosophy is
Does
critical
what I said
consciousness,
sound
and
reasonable,
it's
or did
Marxist
the
and pedophilic.
Exactly. So what I said sounded reasonable, too reasonable. So it has to be Marxist and pedophilic. Is the underlying philosophy?
I proved
that
it.
drives it all.
I proved it. You didn't address any of my fucking
you
points other than to
proved
say,
it.
yeah, Gail Rubin's wrong. Who's, I don't know.
Yeah, you
wrote the
proved it, my
foundational
dude.
documents to queer
You
theory.
proved it. Absolutely. Good job.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we only have two more questions on the super chat list. So if you have any questions that you definitely want to hear be addressed by our speakers tonight, please go ahead and fire them in now. Remember, 100% of our super chats go to charity tonight, so it's for a good cause. Don't hesitate. From Arcade Outpost for $10, they say people don't have. I'm sorry, I just read that one. So only one more. From Samar Rao, they say for $10, off topic, but is Scott a big Lord of the Rings fan? What are the debaters' thoughts on the new Ring of Power show? Rings of Power show. Sorry. Totally
yes.
Good one to end. I like
So
that one. To end
that's a good
on.
one. I like Lord of the Rings, the books and the movies. I think the books were great, but I'm like not like a Silmarillion reading fucking nerd about it. Like I read the Fellowship and the Hobbit, and I mean the trilogy and the Hobbit, like as a kid, and I liked it. The joke is actually like the reason I have Bags In behind me is because it's like several layers of like a joke in the community. Because I'm 6'5". First of all, that's part of the joke. The second is that it's just greenery and it's kind of funny. The next part is that like the Shire was basically a libertarian anarchist community that respected private property rights and only had limited councils, very rarely, and then just like the general nerd shit. So it's just like multiple layers. And so I tend to have Bags In behind me sometimes.
Okay. And then we have another super chat from Neon Ghoul for $5. They say, what's up with the disdain in the trans/LGBTQ and other minority groups towards those in their community that have different views? For example, D-trans people.
D-trans people. There are some people who are unfairly malign D-trans people. The correct and the reason they do that is because a lot of D-trans people will use like their own experiences to categorically reject and prevent anyone else from achieving gender-affirming care. Now, when a detrans person does that, that is bad. They deserve to be attacked on those ideological grounds. However, a lot of detransitioners are not like that, and they should be supported. Some people make mistakes. Sometimes medical institutions make mistakes, and they should be absolutely be supported because the ultimate goal is for happy and healthier people. And sometimes you're going to get it wrong, and those people deserve support. They deserve empathy, and it's unfair. And it's unfair to categorically decide that all detrans people are bad. I don't think that happens a ton. I do think most of the disdain, the malice, goes towards people who, because transitioning didn't work out for them, then no one should be allowed to do it. And I think that is worth criticizing, as long as you don't group all detrans people into that.
Yeah. So I've spoken with a lot of detrans people. Kind of friends with Richie Tulibar. I did a panel with quite a few Shapeshifter and Chloe Cole and stuff like that. I think what it really is mostly is that a lot of trans people, I would say, get wrapped up in gender ideology. Right? Not all of them, obviously. There are people like Buck Angel that are not wrapped up in that ideology. And then, people like Blair White that obviously aren't in that ideology because they're prominent right-wing figures.
The good ones, right?
I mean, sure, if that's how you want to do it.
There's a reason members of minority crew. There's a reason that members of minority communities get really, really popular on the right. Like Yiannopoulos was really, really popular because he was gay and like shitting on gay people. Blair White's really popular in the right wing.
Jesus Christ! Every time I make a point, you can't shut the fuck up.
Oh, shit.
Hush for a second. I didn't interrupt you while you made your point. Right, and so what I would say is that what occurs is that detrans people often have like some type of experience that pulls them out of the ideology. And, there's no one that is able to see the cult more than someone that was in the cult. And so a lot of transgender people that are wrapped up in this ideology, they're getting a kind of narcissistic supply from people that are constantly beautifying, constantly, there's a lot of pernicious things in there, right? There's a lot of individuals that might have like autogynephilia, and there's like sexual like problems within that are occurring in this, and so what ends up happening is that when detrans people come out, they start talking about the cult because they're the people that are most likely to have been harmed by it, right? They're the people like look at someone like Chloe Cole, right? Like they're not what you might categorize as quote unquote true trans, if that is a thing. And yet they were swept up in the indoctrination and in the cult and in the love bombing and all the support and all the social anxiety and problems. And, they were able to very easily and quickly get gender affirming care and, attach their obsessive disorders like OCD or ADHD or autism, to gender ideology and to the process of transitioning. And more often than not, they have these surgeries that deeply harm them. And so they break out of that cult. And once they break out of the cult, they start talking against the cult. And there are a large contingent of people, especially online, very loud, kind of activist types, not the types that kind of just want to live their life and pass and go about normal life without being like engaged in the politics of it all. That come after them hard.
Do you think the constant validation that the detransitioners get from anti-trans advocates and TERFs and just straight-up transphobes might influence their opinion? Can indoctrination go that way? The biggest study on detransitioners, performed by Lisa Lippman, the progenitor of the ROGD myth, recruited people from TERF websites, and even though that she was recruiting the people who were most likely to be harmed, most likely to be rushed into transitioning, almost as many people said that they were pushed to detransition, that they were persuaded not to transition, that were experienced transphobic abuse. Almost as many people said that, and these are detransitioners as the people who are that you're talking about, the people who were pressured to transition. So can you indoctrinate someone out of being trans?
Okay,
is that possible?
I mean, I think
it's that question. We'll move on.
Yeah, I certainly think that it's possible. Obviously, right? Like if you can be indoctrinated to go one direction, right? Then it's possible to be indoctrinated to go in the other direction. The problem with that is that it's we have a much bigger problem within the last decade, and so much of this research is going to be centered around individual. Like when we look at like what is the average like desistance rate, like we're talking about like 7 years, I think, for male to female desisting, and it's something like 4 or 5 for female to male. And so like, the data just isn't there to capture individuals that have been part of this like new wave of social contagion, so that we can have a better understanding of like what indoctrination has done in terms of the trans community.
Well, this might comfort you. All those statistics come from gender clinics, so it's very obvious they're not pushing people at the drop of a hat to pursue medical transitioning. That's where those stats come from. So hopefully that's
it's irrelevant to what I said.
From Leslie Flemons for $5, they say, Jangles, have you heard of the term MAPs, minor attracted persons? And if so, how do you feel about it?
I'd hate them. Minor attracted persons? Fuck them. No, wait, let me choose my words carefully there. Fuck them as in, like, dismiss them. All right? Yeah. See, those are actual, like, groomers. Those are actual people who actually want to advocate for pedophilia. Why isn't Libs of TikTok going after them? Like, why aren't we talking about them? Those are actual fucking pedophiles.
They do.
I don't see it. Libs of TikTok, they're mostly focused on the queer stuff, man.
Okay, currently our last super chat on the list right now, Samara Rao for $10. They say, for both debaters, approximately what proportion of homosexual or trans identity is predicated by genetics versus the environment?
It's like asking, like, it's like asking, like, is the length or width of a rectangle more indicative of its area? Like,
I mean, like, genetics. The problem is we just don't have the data. Like, we may eventually one day have that data, but like, we're technologically way behind on that.
The best data that we have,
and the problem is like the data is getting even worse because now add like epigenetics. Like we know very little about epigenetics.
The best data that we have does suggest that you cannot meaningfully change someone's sexuality or gender identity, especially not to a large degree. You can't meaningfully change it.
Yeah,
so
and then also,
if a lot of people will confuse like genetic versus environmental to mean like choice versus not choice, that's not the case. I'm pretty comfortable saying that it is not a meaningful choice that people decide.
So the data seems to suggest that there's more fluidity for females, right? Especially than males. And like, we have a very kind of like, I could say, I don't want to say sophomoric. I don't know the quiet term, but very early kind of understanding of sexual imprinting in males and like how that leads to paraphilic disorders. Versus like sexuality and things like that, and to what degree those two things are different. I do think when it comes to like sexuality, it's probably more inherent than paraphilic disorders, and so even that becomes problematic because of our lack of understanding. But it does seem to suggest that sexuality is a little bit more fluid for females in general, right? Like distribution than it is for males.
Gotcha. Surgeon General sent another super chat for $10 for this is from our wonderful moderator, Heat Shield, for the charity. Thank you, brother. Amazing. So once again, thank you again, Surgeon General and Heat Shield. Thank you so much. So that's the end of our super chat list. I will go ahead and move to the non-super chat list from Udehef. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm so sorry, but they ask, education about sexual assault. What is the woke groomer organization? What is this woke groomer organization?
What? I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Education about sexual assault? What? Oh, is that like the charity you're supporting? Was that a joke?
It was much earlier in the debate. I can't even remember the
that might have been a joke, facetiously calling the charity you're supporting a groomer organization.
Yeah, I don't fucking know.
So sorry for ruining your joke. From Atomic for $10, they say, can we at least agree that nobody is talking about explicit sex with children? Saying homosexual/transgender people exist is not the quote-unquote grooming or indoctrination it's asserted to be by right-wing news.
No.
Can we all agree to that?
No. You don't agree to that?
No.
Okay.
I mean, is it large scale, like where like in schools or something? No, of course not. But like obvious, like, I mean, teachers don't have an increased or a decreased rate of sexual assault than any other category, right? So obviously there's going to be legitimate pedophiles in any place. When you say like what we're talking about, like, yeah, some of the founders are absolutely talking about that. But even those, the majority of queer theorists and founders are talking about, some of them are talking about, like, Gail Rubin, for example, is specifically advocating, sex between, adult men and children. But for the most part, that's not really the goal. The goal is destruction of category and boundaries.
I did a little bit of research on Gail, and a later interview talking about that said that no, that's misconstruing what she was arguing.
I'm sure.
That's absolutely not the case.
You go read Thinking Sex. It's a founding document.
Like, I think like some of the some really, really specifics, like if a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old engage in sexual intercourse, that might be creepy depending on the circumstances, but we can say that's meaningfully different than like a 10-year-old, right? They can both be wrong, but they're not the same thing, right? As
the resident libertarian, I'm not getting into this.
Oh, yeah, I bet you have very interesting ideas on age of consent debates.
Yeah, no, this is fucking, It's a stupid conversation. Age of consent should be 24. There you go.
Okay.
It's my opinion.
From Junk Shop Library, they say they know they missed the opening statements, but they want to know, is there a reason neither person arguing has their pronouns on the screen or in the description?
I should have put mine in. They're he, him.
I think the whole pronoun thing is stupid. Like, if you want to if someone has different pronouns and they're trying to pass as a different gender, then if they're not an asshole, respect their pronouns. At the same time, this idea of come together for the pronoun game and it's somehow wrong that I don't present my pronouns. I think you can get from what I'm saying that I probably go by he, right? I think it's just a silly thing.
All right, and we got 1 more minute left on the clock. So, from Palmo 316, question for Fabian: do you make the conscious choice not to answer direct questions, or is it a reflex?
I did not answer any direct questions. I understand the bullshit that's packaged into the question, so I answer the question appropriately. Like when Jangles is asking me if queer people are attacked on the basis of their queer identity. I'm saying I think that all demographics are, at some level are attacked off of their differences. Right?
If you had
he wants to make it a unique victim.
Yeah, if you had to guess, on the basis of sexuality, do you think straight people are attacked more or gay people are attacked more on the basis of their sexuality? If you had to
per
guess.
Capita, right? Because obviously straight.
Yeah, per capita, yeah.
A larger group.
And we don't even have to be physical attacks, just impugn.
Historically or now?
People?
I don't know that. I don't know that. Both. I don't know. Historically, without a fucking doubt, LGBT people have been attacked.
Sweet.
If you're talking about now, I don't know that it would be statistically significant.
Dude, a third of the country still thinks that I shouldn't be able to be married. Who thinks that straight people shouldn't be able to get married? Don't equate those two. Come on, you know better. But thank you for finally directly answering a question.
No, it's
all right. So that is the end of the question and answer section. We have all the questions. Thank you all for your questions. I would apologize to you, Fabian, for that last one. I feel like I probably should have censored that one, but I didn't have a chance to read it before I read it out loud.
I don't give a fuck. Hey, man, I made 20 arguments that Jangles ran away from, so I'm okay with
away from a
answering direct questions with direct answers that he doesn't like.
Yeah, I don't like your answers because mine make more sense. We have competing ideals of reality of what's more explanatory of phenomena. I think mine's reasonable, and yours is moon logic.
480,000 citations, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you both will join me in the after show, which is linked in the description below. Everybody, if you would like to see the conversation continue, it's going to be an open mic section as well. So I will allow for one person in the audience to join at a time for a few minutes at a time as well.
I probably got 20 minutes in me. I'll hard cut off at 9 because I'll get in trouble.
That's fine. I don't want to take it too long anyways. I'm tired. I really appreciate it no matter what.
Hmm?
Hypothetically, would you be okay with sexual education?
If a random post on Twitter is to be believed, Warnock won the runoff.
Okay. Fabian, thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.
What's up? Yeah, I figured I'd stop by for a little bit.
Gamers.
I heard you, Jangles. You said you only had 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. I'll get in trouble then.
Your husband gonna get pissed off at you?
Yeah.
Oh fuck. The real question conservatives want to know, right? Is who wears the pants?
Neither of us. Okay,
knew you'd
we
fucking say
work from
that.
home, man. Fuck, we don't have to fucking wear pants.
Oh shit. Well, I don't please don't tube in anybody. I'm on Twitch right now.
Okay. Oh, were you asking me for my Twitter?
No, I got it. Sorry.
I got it. Okay.
Okay. Cool. All right, let's do this.
You good?
Oh yeah.
You all set?
All good. All set.
What just happened?
Are you back?
Jesus Christ, I have eardrums.
All right, people of the internet.
My
welcome to
eardrums,
After-
bro.
Is it hurt? Is it loud? I'm sorry. I've never gotten any feedback about that. So tell me more. Tell me more. How bad is it?
No. I meant the little intro, the music transition. It was like,
Yeah, how bad is it? How bad is it?
Nah,
Is
it's
it like,
fine.
it was pretty loud.
It wakes people
Tell me.
up, man. It wakes them
There
up
you
for
go.
for the show.
Okay. Yeah, wake up and get with it. It's time to argue about this shit. All right. No, we're not live in an hour, Samar. We're here. We're ready to go. So,
I'm arguing. I'm chilling,
Gentlemen,
man.
So we're bringing on other
Go
people? What's the deal with the post show? I don't understand the format.
yeah,
Let's do
I'm
it.
going to give each person who wants to join, what did I do last time? I think I did 2 minutes. I think I'll do that. 2 minutes to be honest. If there's somebody in line, I'll leave them on if
Mhm.
there's nobody in line. But if they want to join, 2 minutes on screen to join the conversation as they will. Of course, you guys will get deference as the guests of honor. But other than that, it's free for all. So, who's the groomers and who's the accusers?
Wait, are we waiting on someone else to come in, or are we just like continuing the discussion from like the debate?
No, let's just continue with the discussion. I'm gonna just bring him in right now. Here's our first guest, LSP. LSP, welcome.
Hi, how are y'all doing?
Say hi to
What's up,
Jangles
bro?
and Fabian.
Hi,
Me and
Jangles.
Els
Hi,
here,
Scott.
please.
I've never heard of this guy in my life.
Oh,
So I guess
What? Yes, you have. You've hung out with LSP.
I don't know who this. We met like twice, maybe that on a panel. I don't know if he thinks we're friends or something. It's fucking weird. But anyway, I was mainly watching for you, Scott. And I have some questions I'd like to ask. Is that's okay, right? Atheist Edge,
Yeah.
Yes.
Kaz, or
Please.
What?
So I just want a direct answer. If I were a teacher and I were teaching a kindergarten class and I had a pride flag on my wall while teaching that kindergarten class, would there be anything inappropriate about that?
In isolation, it's difficult to know. Like, let's say nothing else is going on, you just have a pride flag, right?
Okay.
I think it might be weird, but like at the same time, like it's a rainbow flag. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
I don't know that I necessarily am like
So there's
deeply
nothing
offended
wrong
by
with it.
like
It
just
would-
that.
So there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, again, I said it depends upon like
Okay,
a
in
totality
isolation,
of
there's
things.
nothing wrong with
yeah, in isolation,
Okay.
though. No.
Now, let's say I have a pride flag on my wall and I teach my kindergarten kids that the family unit is more than just mommy and daddy. Sometimes it's daddy and daddy, and sometimes it's mommy and mommy. Is there anything wrong with that?
So long as you're just teaching that, right? Like you're just letting people know that like other people exist, and like and then you're moving on, and like other questions that arise about sexuality and families
Okay.
and things.
So
like
if I
that
say,
are
if I
kind
were
of
to
put
say,
towards the parents, that's fine.
yeah. So if I were to say, there's some families that are just mommy and daddy, and that's okay. They love each
Yeah.
other just like your mommy and daddy love each other, and it's okay to be like that.
Yeah,
Nothing wrong with
perfectly
that.
fine.
Okay, I'm not clear on what you think. I guess critical pedagogy is supposed to look like. I want like a lesson plan. Like, how do I teach somebody something that is sexually contort, inappropriate? How do I teach this? Like, what would the message
Yeah.
be?
So
I would teach this?
what you want to do is you want to Google, right? If you want to like find more information, right? Google national NSES, right? This is from CICUS. A lot of schools have adopted this, and that is National Standards of National Sex Education Standards, 2022. And you can see in charts where they're teaching, for example, kindergarten through second grade, about like gender identity and like requiring competency for fifth graders on like hormones and androgen therapy and things that are clearly beyond the pale.
That was the second.
Why? So how do I like? What is the way that I would teach gender identity that would be beyond the pale? Like if I say there are some people who feel like they're boys because they like boyish things, and some people are girls, they like girlish things. Like we got a conception of boy and girl in kindergarten, right? Mm-hmm. What would be wrong with that? That's teaching gender identity.
Yeah, I think you and I both know that that's not really teaching gender identity, to just be like boys sometimes are girls are sometimes tomboys. Like that's
the
not
second
what's
thing
happening.
you said. Like 10-year-olds are like the best population to start learning about like the hormones that they're going to experience during puberty. That if anything, that is the like, ideal age to teach that stuff.
Yeah, no, teaching 10-year-olds about androgen therapy is fucking disgusting.
Not teaching them about hormones is necessary. They're about to go through it.
Yeah, that's groomer shit right there.
That's groomer shit right there to teach them what hormones do to their bodies?
No.
Yeah, fucking let them find out on their
You're
own,
trying
right?
to pivot and obfuscate again.
Pivot and you said something, I directly address it. Okay, cool. Man.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to let you guys go at it in between these guys that I let on. LSP, you're welcome to stay on. After Peacecraft gets his 2 minutes, you can get another 2 minutes and so on if nobody else joins or whatever.
I don't want to accidentally pivot by directly addressing something.
Okay. Peacecraft.
Okay, bro.
All right, so I have a question for Jangles and his automatic or his argumentation defense of this being a conspiracy by asking a couple priors. So Jangles, do you believe or do you not believe that theory has an origination and is iterated on and worked on by others from past into the present day?
Sure. And because it has so many iterations and because it's worked on by so many different people, it's really dishonest to say that the theory is like, you can point to this is the origin and this is what it actually means based on like one person. Hundreds, if not thousands of people go into what a theory is and all levels of it, yeah.
All right, cool. Do you believe that individuals can act on an ideology and not know the origins of it?
Of course.
Okay. Do you believe that individuals can act on an ideology without centralized command and control? A good analogy might be Christianity. A lot of Christians go to church every Sunday, and they aren't taking walking orders from the Pope, and they don't know all of the theory, or there's the church term for it that pastors go to school for or whatever, but they don't know the disciple of Nicaea or the writings of Saint Rothbart or this, that, and the other. Yeah. But they all decentralized go to church every Sunday and act and live and try to practice and put into actuality those ideals in the real world.
Yeah, because they're so
I'm almost done. If we grant all these things, why are you so defensive of Fabian's claim when it comes to leftist theory, queer theory, and that line of origination and that line of praxis?
Because you just fucking destroyed it better than I ever could. His argument would be that there's a central Christian dogma that is going to permeate every single aspect of Christianity. And that no matter if you think that you are divorced from it or not, you're going to obey the central command of this extremely broad ideology with a ton of different sects, with a ton of different interpretations, with a ton of internal disagreements. You just destroyed his point better than I ever could. And I appreciate that, buddy. Thank you for being on my side. I'm not going to. I would never accuse Christians. I would never accuse Christianity of having like a central, like overarching goal that applies to all of them.
This is pathetic.
It is pathetic. You thought that was a good point. They didn't just completely demolish your entire fucking central argument.
Dude, scream it loud enough in your inability to be able to deal with any argumentation.
You're right,
as much
man.
As you want, but like,
keep saying I can't deal with arguments every time I
literally just strawmanned
me.
You literally just strawman me to say that you're trying to say that there's a conspiracy in order to prove the conspiracy, and you didn't engage with this question at all. You just ran away like a scared bitch.
I said that, like, this notion, if he's trying to like draw parallels between your argument and his, like applying it to like Christianity. Like, yeah, there's a central like sort of thing that all Christians believe. You know, there are very few tenets I think that would be universally applicable. They think Jesus is a cool dude and maybe he's the Messiah. I don't know. There's a ton of different sects, and he just tried to. It would be ridiculous to say that there's a central like original thought process that is secretly guiding all of Christians, that whether they know it or not is actually influencing them to some ultimate goal that is as of yet undefined.
It's not secret.
It would be really
It's called
dumb.
Christianity.
It's called Christianity, and
It's
yeah,
a worldview
it's very
and a
broad
philosophy,
and diverse.
right?
It's very broad and diverse with a ton of like heterogeneity in its belief structure. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much.
What the fuck are you talking? What are you smoking, dude? Like
You
you're
think
just yelling and saying random things to avoid the question.
You said okay.
That there's
here's
a
the thing.
philosophy. People can
Yeah,
promulgate that
there's a philosophy.
without understanding the entirety of the philosophy.
Because this entire group that you've made up, the woke, to pretend that they have a more coherent,
made up
centralized
the
ideology.
woke?
Yeah, do you think woke is something
The
that we made up?
wokeness doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
the wokeness, like we invented
Hold on,
that religion.
pause. You're
So not
claim
only
is
yeah,
that
so not only are
wokeness
you comparing
doesn't
Christianity
exist.
to wokeness, but Christians like define themselves as Christian, like they made up the thing.
Do you
Wokeness
believe
is something like that you've
wokeness
decided that is a
exists?
religion that other people have, or more likely a cult that other people have, and somehow the
So
other
you think
like that
wokeness doesn't
second one
exist?
is more centralized. Wokeness
Are you
exists, yeah.
legitimately retarded?
Are you legitimately trying to argue that wokeness is something that like a centralized religion that we all took part in? Like that we all decided, I'm a wokester, all right? And this is what we
Dog,
believe.
you are pivoting so hard. It's so
I'm not-
pathetic.
Do you know what pivot means?
It's a philosophy.
Do you know what?
You're
It's not a coherent, unifying
You're trying
philosophy.
to- you're
No,
try-
you've made
you're
it so
trying to-
broad as to be meaningless. What does woke mean?
Critical
does woke mean?
consciousness. Critical consciousness.
Critical consciousness. What does that mean?
Critical consciousness is the instantiation of the dialectic in thought, right? The instantiation of the dialectic.
All right, I got 5 minutes left. Just
as
wonderful. Just
as
wonderful.
well as using Marxist materialist dialectics and the dialectical process towards cultural institutions with an assumption that there is a superposition that exists, and that as long as that superposition exists within a cultural institution, that there will always be oppression, and that what needs to occur is a rebalancing of power dynamics, and to have a synthesis of those power dynamics.
So if you ask a
to
woke person
balance
what they
out
believe, is
via
it going to sound
equity.
like that? Is it going to sound like that? Is it going to sound like what you just said? If you ask a woke person what they believe, is it going to sound remotely like that? Versus if you ask a Christian what they believe, there's going to be a lot of different answers. But it's going to involve God, it's going to involve Jesus, it's going to involve a lot of things
You're
that are
literally
similar.
proving peacecraft right. Oh my god.
No, I'm not.
I honestly think you might
Peacecraft
just be too stupid for this
demolished her. I don't
conversation.
know why he thought that was a good point to bring up.
You're
Since
trying
you have
real
to leave
hard
in
to claim
5 minutes,
victory. Go
Jangles?
ahead, do you, bro?
Since you have to leave in 5 minutes, Jangles, LSP, would you mind if we just let Peacecraft switch with you and let him have his turn real quick? Just so I'm sorry. I know that it's
Yeah, I'll stay after
but-
Jangles leaves to
you-
finish up with
I know that
LSP.
you're going for Fabian and he's gunning for Jangles, so I just wanted to keep it lively. I'm sorry, but you'll be right back.
We'll
Here,
be friends
I'll
one
even
day,
keep you on.
LSP.
I'll keep you on. You can stay. On. Go ahead, Peacecraft.
I'm
giving you
the
2 minutes. Go
teacher's
ahead.
favorite LSP. No, so Jangles, I believe I've kind of locked you into a box on this one. If
believe that you
please,
believe that.
please let me finish. If we can say that theory has a through line, if we believe that individuals can promulgate this or believe in this and not fully understand it, and if we believe that it's not fully centralized as some sort of vast conspiracy, like, I really feel like I've kind of scuttled your fucking conspiracy claims. Additionally, throughout this conversation, I think you and I agree. We both like grooming. We both like instruction to future generations for moral principles that we believe are valuable. In one hand, you cannot say that grooming does not exist, and then on the other side, you cannot say that normalization of treatments, ethics, actions, and praxis is existing at the same time. You've worked yourself into a corner in this position.
You have to be this stupid to think this. Oh my God, this is what happened. This is what it is. Grooming does not exist. Normalization does. Yes, those are not contradictory. Grooming means sexualization. That's what That's what fucking Fabian defined it. He tried to pretend that sexualization has nothing to do with grooming, and then his entire fucking opening was saying that like wokeness is inherently like pedophilic. All right, grooming has a sexual connotation to it. That's why he uses it the way he does. That's why the rights use it the way they are. Saying normalizing certain things is not grooming. The way that you're using grooming is just this idiotic, like anti-woke reactionary version that you're using because of its pedophilic connotations. And no, yeah, theory has a through line. Theory is not a thing. Theory is like it's passed between people. There's no coherent individual like component of any sort of theory that's going to make its way untouched through 100, 1,000, a million different people. Everybody's going to put their own spin on it. A theory is not a tangible force in the universe. It is ideas. It's like say that ideas have a through line. There might be something that people sort of agree on, but no, there is not this untouched promulgation of a uniquely like a plan, a plot that's been instructed that's going to survive 1,000 different iterations. And that's also assuming like the notion that we can't come up with shit on our own. I came to the conclusion that being gay was fine without any influence from all that stuff. Like, maybe that's something I can just find on my own. Yeah, maybe society has something to do with it, because, I wouldn't know what gay was without society, but to attach it to this, like, weird, esoteric notion of a theory that's so vague as to be meaningless, nah, dude, come on. All right,
I think it's real simple. Two things can be true at once, and Jangles just honestly hasn't engaged with enough philosophy to understand.
All right, why do I have the opinions I do if I haven't engaged with the philosophy? How could it have tricked me?
What?
Why do I think the things I do?
You think people require deep philosophical learning to have opinions?
No, of course not. But you're making the case that my opinions are this thing. They are being secretly influenced or influenced without my knowledge. I think I have a good
very
explanation.
obvious.
I grew up, I was gay. All right, I realized I was gay way too late because I grew up in an incredibly homophobic environment. And as a result of that, I never got a convincing argument as being why gay is wrong. And so, independently of any sort of like Marxist thought, I decided that no, I don't want other kids to go through the same things I went through. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. And you did it beautifully. I clocked it amazingly. That can't be reasonable. That can't be the actual explanation. No, it has to be some Marxist pedophilic plot to groom our children. The reason,
I never said any of that shit. Like, you're so full of straw man that it's difficult. I never said that the reason you're gay is because you were fucking groomed.
I didn't say that you said that. I didn't say that you said that. I didn't say that you said that, honey. I said that that's the reason I believe what I believe. All right, because of my own individual experiences. And I came
Nobody
to that
is saying that you were groomed into being fucking gay.
What I'm saying is a lot of people say that. Wait, a lot of people say that. They said it the last time I was on Modern Day Debate, man. Come on.
Cool. You're dealing with some fucking right-wing chuds. That's not who you're dealing with now. What you're doing is you're denying that philosophy promulgates and that people incorporate that philosophy. Okay. You think like you have this weird thing of like a collectivist ideology while simultaneously believing that people are individualistic in all of their...
It's like wanting good things in society. Is that a collectivist ideology? Is that how broad we're making it?
Well, it depends on what you mean by good.
Oh, shit. I want good things, and I don't like bad things. Oh, man, I must have been influenced by some ideology. Holy shit. Incredible.
Right. Good is a question of morality. Right, I want to let someone else get the last word. It involves philosophy, obviously.
Who wants the last word against me? I'm leaving.
All right, thank you so much, Jangles. I really appreciate you joining us. Really,
all right, so have fun, LSP. Sorry about it.
See you next time. All right, LSP. I'll give you your 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm serious. I met that guy like twice. It's fucking weird, if you ask me. I don't know who that is. So Scott, I looked into the thing you told me to look into. This isn't a lesson plan. I don't know. I still don't know.
No.
Inappropriate speech, sexuality, or
So national standards for national sex education standards by CICUS, right, which is like one of the major players in this. They're not giving a lesson plan. What they're giving is like points that should be reached.
Giving
right?
a goal.
Like a goal. Like by the end of 5th grade, you need to know this. Like they're leaving up to the states and to the teachers and stuff the construction of the lesson.
So, I Googled what you told me to Google and I linked it. You didn't tell me if this is what you're talking about, but I don't know what in this you disagree with. So I'll just read from this, the overview that they have. Comprehensive sex education program aims to build knowledge and skills in human development, relationship, decision-making, communication, and how to access to sexual and reproductive health services. Ideally, according to the National Sex Education Standards.
Maybe I'll give you the direct link. And I apologize. Please let him get a little bit more time.
Sure.
Yeah, it says this education should begin in kindergarten and continue through 12th grade. This education is intended to be age appropriate, medically accurate, evidence-based, and culturally responsive. I guess I just don't understand. What's the issue with this?
What the fuck is it? Oh my god. I'm looking for the actual document because you're not looking at the document that I was trying to get you.
Are we talking about sex ed state law and policy chart?
Should be page 18 of their 2020. Their 2020, I think, is the last one they published, but they have a 2022 version. But they have a breakdown by their chart by like when things should be done, right?
Okay.
If I can just fucking find it, Jesus Christ.
Page 18 on this chart is sex education and HIV instruction, and it's not when, it's about state laws. So it's telling you what state laws say these have to be taught.
Here we go. Let me find this.
This
right here.
Is it this?
No. Here we go. So this is 2020. Okay. This is the last time that they aggregated it by age, right? So if we go down to page, I think it might actually be 19 is where it starts, right? And they break it down by or 20, page 20, right?
Standards by grade level. Okay.
Right. Standards
by grade level. I'm going to break my neck to view this, but okay.
Yeah, you gotta flip it. I don't know why it comes out that way. I'm sorry. So when you flip it, right? So like you can go to, let's say, so like by second grade, it's demanded like they expect, right? If you follow these guidelines, that you could do that a second grader is able to discuss the range of ways people express their gender and how gender role stereotypes may limit behavior, right? Like this is
what's wrong with that?
What's wrong with a 2-year-old being told and being able to competently spit back how gender role stereotypes?
In second grade, you're about 7 or 8 years old. You're not 2.
Well, I meant to say second grader, not 2-year-old. Sorry. Obviously, I don't think second graders are 2-year-olds.
Yeah,
no,
so
I don't think that.
With a 7-year-old identifying gender norms. Yeah, I guess explain it to me.
So the way that you have to do this is that they have a certain set of guidelines, right? A certain assumption about gender role stereotypes and how they limit behaviors. And in order to be able to pass the curricula, a second grader needs to be able to say, for example, that women that women are forced into certain roles and that women aren't able to do the same things as men because of because society or people don't treat men and women fairly. It's very obvious from these guidelines, right, that you're talking about indoctrinated second graders into a worldview about these limitations. Now, is there a way to presumably do this appropriately? Of course there is.
Can you tell me what that is then? Because they're not prescribing any way to teach this. You put that on them. What's the appropriate way to teach that?
This is literally made, but this is literally this is literally made by Psychus. You know what their slogan is?
No, what is it?
Sex education for social justice.
Okay.
Obviously I don't need to prove that they're woke, right? That they want woke shit.
Can I just get the way to do it appropriately and inappropriately? I just want to know if I want to teach a second grader about gender identity, what is the way I do it appropriately? What's the way I do it inappropriately? If I say gender identity is real and gender norms are real, and there are certain ways
it's sex ed for social change. I apologize, not social justice.
Okay, I mean that's fine. I'm just curious, how do I do this appropriately or inappropriately? As a teacher, what would it look like in a classroom?
What would be appropriate is not teaching fucking gender role stereotypes and how they negatively impact at all. Right?
Why?
You shouldn't be teaching first graders and second graders about the fucking patriarchy. What are you talking about? What do you mean, why? Because because they're not cognitively developed enough to have inductive and deductive reasoning skills. The only way
graders learn social studies.
Oh my god! It depends on what you mean by social studies. They should learn some development of history.
Well,
you should learn about history,
right? Patriarchy, the way society's been structured.
Right, so you want to indoctrinate children into worldviews that they're not capable of fucking. No, it's not fucking. No, gender role stereotypes.
Marital rape was legal up until 30 years ago. Yeah, it's factually true that society was structured.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is Freudian bullshit, where you fucking where you find shit that is upsetting, okay, and then you fucking decodify it and show it,
vote until
and then
1920.
problematize it and be like, oh, well, we're just talking about factual history. CRT is just talking about factual history. No, like, this is not appropriate to be going into fucking like the beginning of elementary
So that's
school
your argument.
to trying
Okay,
to
then
talk
when is
about
it appropriate?
gender role
If I can't teach
stereotypes.
factual history to a second grader, when can I start teaching a second grader factual history? What
Okay,
age?
now you've changed to factual history instead of
That's because it
gender.
is factual history.
Okay,
Are
so
you
you think that the
wait, are you
patriarchy
denying
is
that it
factual history?
Yes. Are you denying that it is factual history that
I
women
think the
are treated as
patriarchy is
second-class-
not
that women are treated as second-class citizens in this country? Do you deny that that is factual
to
history?
this day.
To this day, yeah, in all sorts of ways.
Yeah,
yes.
that's just ideological woke
Okay,
bullshit.
Then what year did it end?
I'm sorry, what?
What year did it end? When did women stop being treated like second-class citizens?
When they got the right to vote.
In
There's no
1920.
more. There's no more systemic. There's no more systemic sexism at that point, unless you're looking at specific state laws, etc.
Okay. I wonder what the point of the Civil Rights Act was then. Okay.
Okay. Well, how about this? If women are such if they're secondary citizens, why is it that that women have a right to choose but men don't? If they're
Women
second
don't.
class
You mean
citizens,
Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. Like, they just lost that right, dog. What are you talking about?
in what states is it illegal to get an
In the state
abortion
of Texas,
at any
it is
point?
illegal to get an abortion. In the state of Texas, in fact, in several states, it has been illegal to get an abortion, at least up until the 6-week mark. Several states have total bans on abortion. Several states have bans on abortion as soon as fetal heartbeat begins. This is,
Okay.
again, a fact.
And again, you can still move to another state. You can still drive to another state, right?
How much money do you think it costs?
To drive from one state to another, like I don't know,
You're
like
not a
150
second-class
bucks.
citizen if you've got the money. Like, is that really your argument? So women in
Well,
women
it's a
in
nice
Texas are
pivot from the
default.
fact that in almost every area, women have at least some
I think
access
pivot's
to
the default
abortion.
word every time
And
you get
in
blown the fuck
no
out.
state in America does a man have access to a right to choose. There's not a single state in America where they have that choice. So,
A right
so
to choose. They can't
are
get pregnant.
men
Right
a
to choose
second
what?
class citizen? Are men
Right to choose
second class
what? They think
citizens?
In some ways, men are fucked by society. In more than one ways, yeah, men are fucked by society. Because even the class of man, right, has several subdivisions under it that require a look at the intersection of the ways power structures with it. So men who are feminine probably do worse in society than men who are masculine. Men who are short
You know
do
what?
worse than men who are
Hold on
tall.
real
Men
quick,
who are
real
black
quick.
do worse than men who are white.
You know what? This is a really good debate, and like there's some back and forth in this issue. And I think the fact that there's some back and forth and like good debate in this issue proves that it's not just teaching fucking history and second graders aren't ready for it. It's
What
not
grade-
appropriate
okay,
to teach
LSP.
fucking
What
second
grade-
graders
Hold
this
on,
shit.
LSP.
What grade
Hold
would
on,
they
hold
be
on,
ready
LSP. Hold on, LSP. I'm sorry. I really appreciate your points. I really do. But you've been on for quite a while now, and I want to let
Okay.
Sonic Man have a chance. So you can.
All right.
You're more than welcome to stay on. I'm gonna give him his 2 minutes. I'm probably gonna give him a little bit more than 2 minutes just because you've been on for
That's
so long.
fine. That's fine. I'm going. I'm gonna
Okay.
go talk to Jangles, who's actually
Nice to
a really
meet
good
you,
friend of
Sonic
mine.
Man.
I love Jangles. He's a homie.
Okay.
Peace, love, and
Yeah, I
rock and
really
roll.
appreciate you joining. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye bye. All right, Sonic Man. Sonic Man. How do you say
You gotta show your face, coward. I'm kidding.
it? Are you there? Can you hear us? Oh, did I mute you?
Uh-oh.
I muted you. It's my fault. All right.
Hello, hello.
How do you
Can
say it?
everyone hear me? Sorry.
I
Yes, we
fucking
can-
love this
is
accent
it
already.
Sonic
I
Man
think
or
he's right.
Sonic Man?
Oh, sorry. Hello. Good. I'm coming through all right then.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
with
good.
a beautiful fucking voice.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I just have a couple of things. I'm sorry, it's a little bit disjointed. It's not necessarily related to any one talking point that you were just going over, so I apologize for that. I just did want to say, you know, sort of how I came to pay attention to this sort of stuff was by way of accident. You know, I paid attention to a lot of sort of junk science around gay adoption and things like this in the 70s and 80s, about like there was this organization called Narth, which was I think a religious organization that was putting out really tiny junk science.
Before my time, dog. I was born in 1990. All right.
Oh, right. Well, but it sort of basically the gist of it is that it gave a junk science view of like gay adoption because the studies were very bad. But up until that point, it had been used as the Supreme Court justifications for not having gay adoption. And I guess what I'd like to say now is I've sort of watched James Lindsay. I don't know if you know much about James Lindsay, but he's he's written several like hoax academic papers that get greenlit sort of by this very thing that I'm talking about that used to be a problem sort of on the right, and now it's just become sort of a problem on the left, you know, of gatekeeping ideologues who say that you know, academic ideologues what's the quote, the science will follow
they were
the
called,
politics.
for anyone looking for them, they're called grievance studies. I think it's like 100 or more studies. Some of them they just quoted Mein Kampf and then just changed the race and things. Like they did one about like dog rape in parks and like toxic masculinity. It was hilarious because you can get anything published at this point.
Right, and that's sort of, I guess, my issue is that I even have a hard time trusting what these things may or may not come to, whatever conclusion they come to, because I can't be sure that there's not some person greenlighting it at the other end who just has a certain kind of ideology. And I think, speaking to what you were saying earlier about it doesn't have to be some shady backroom deal where everybody's in cahoots about the same thing. It's just a sort of general feeling that people have that this should be the idea, or this should be the data, or this should be, and I think that's a problem.
Well, so Nature magazine recently put out, was it Nature? I want to say it's Nature. I'm like 90% sure. One of the major journals recently said that like they're not going to put anything out that might have a harmful impact to like certain communities. And they were going to refuse to publish science, even if the science is true, if they believe that it has some form of harmful impact or that it doesn't necessarily purport things that, like, you know, they find acceptable. Like that's insane.
I mean, that's not telling the truth and doing science, though, is it? I mean, that's right. So I guess that was the one big thing I wanted to say, and. Anyway, I enjoyed the debate. Thank you.
Before you leave, can you please say cheerio?
Cheerio.
Nice. Okay. Thank you so much, Sonic Man, for joining us and for giving us your thoughts. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Fabian, you ready to get out of here, man? I'm sure you're tired.
Yeah, I'm ready to go do a react. Dude, I'm a Twitch streamer. I'm not you fucking YouTubers. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go do another reaction of a TED talk from teachers talking about how to activate your students' political affiliation and use the curriculum to ensure critical, you know, theory and just being widely celebrated, you know, things like that. But of course, none of this shit exists. I'm crazy. I have a conspiracy theory, but, you know, he can't point out the conspiracy other than just the philosophy that I'm saying exists. So, yeah, I think it was a fun night.
Yeah, definitely.
And nice meeting you, by the way.
Nice meeting you too. Did we talk on Stardust's stream once? I feel like we did.
I mean, I've been doing this for about. I'm the libertarian in like the Twitch politics space. It's weird that I haven't been on Modern Day Debates before, but like, fuck it, we're here now. So like, maybe I'm disconnected in some way, but like, yeah, like hit me up or DM me over, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to, take my time, go through this debate and flush out my ideas. So definitely would love to do that. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody in the chat, everybody in the audience, thank you so much for joining me again. I want to let you guys know this Saturday, coming up at 9 p.m. Eastern, I have Matt Dillahunty joining me to debate William Albright on Mariology. Is it reasonable or not? So that's coming up. It's gonna be
Mariology.
Mariology. Check out Matt Dillahunty's channel, Atheist Debates. He did a video on it. That's the whole genesis of this. Matt Dillahunty did a video on Mariology, and that's a whole thing I don't want to get into. We'll be on the debate. But William Albright is a Catholic.
I'll check it out.
And yeah, William Albright's a Catholic. He's a Mariologist, and he took issue with Matt's characterization. So we're going to have a debate about it. So please join us, subscribe, like it if you loved it, share it if you want to spread it, subscribe, all that good stuff.
You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.